So,
Well, I'll be very clear. The character is
Friday, yeah. Okay. Oh, good place. Good places. I'm going here on Labor Day weekend. Just snowmass.
Oh,
So, yeah,
that's one of the peaks I want to climb.
Oh, for sure.
that's Aspen there.
Yes, yeah, but Snowmass has one. Is this your,
That's just I just printed off the itinerary.
Stuff like that. Just so that
yeah,
people can back up
that's
too.
one, the only reason
But anyway, and another thing that occurred to
it's
me,
not that difficult to
and
remember.
my former veteran, I don't know if Lisa sent me a link to share my screen.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I did that once. My first 14 was launch peak.
Yes, I will make a caveat that the
Told me this
characterizations
before.
are my own.
You've done the
Does
Moonbell.
that help?
I have not.
I can tell by your
Guess
face
what?
that it's really easy.
I'm not either. I'm not going to.
You know I
Yeah,
try not to.
Because
So
that
I
one is,
apologize.
that rock
Well,
is
thank you,
so
Mark. I'm glad you said something. I will be
friable.
extremely clear
Yeah.
about
I mean,
the
you're
characterization.
every step,
Yes, yes.
you're worried it's going to get wet.
Yeah, I know.
So
I don't know how many.
11. I think that way two council members,
sandstone.
you,
It's that red
you,
sandstone.
Paige,
making sure
and
that
Lisa.
it's just
So,
not.
yeah.
Making sure I didn't take one that it was meant for everybody else.
No. You were meant to have one. So
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Thank you for that, Mark. So,
We're up.
Mayor, Mark just asked me to give you a heads up that when we get to the budget discussion, I made a few slides just to kind of, we're going to talk about a lot of numbers, so I figured people would rather see numbers than hear them in one ear and out the other. So give you a heads up, but I'll get through this quickly. So, anyway,
I
thank you.
appreciate it. It's convened in open session that all council members are present with the exception of Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Holmer, who is at a conference in Austin. Oh, there she is. Sorry, Julie.
All right.
Okay. Then I rescind that. Councilmember Shelby Williams, and he'll be here for the regular meeting. The council will now recess into executive session in the Children's Program Room to hold a closed executive meeting pursuant to the provisions of Vernon's Texas Codes Annotated Government Code, Chapter 551. The Open Meetings Act, in accordance with the authority contained in Section 551071, to consult with the attorney, receive legal advice, and discuss litigation, and Section 551072 to discuss real estate matters. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
I now declare the Plano City Council preliminary open meeting is reconvened in open session, and that all council members are present. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Julie Holmer will be on Zoom. Our first item on the preliminary agendas is consideration and action resulting from the executive session. Our next item is the personnel appointment, the Rewrite Advisory Committee Chair. Liaisons?
I was just looking at Maria, sorry. Maria and I discussed, and we would like to appoint Bennett Ratliff as chair.
And I second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to appoint Bennett Ratliff as Chair of the Rewrite Advisory Committee. All in favor? Raise your hands. Sorry. Go ahead.
For the Rewrite Advisory Committee Chair, do we want the appointee to be from Planning and Zoning, given that the chair of the committee may end up being also the next chair of Planning and Zoning?
I don't see a conflict because they're all related to the planning and zoning for the city. So, I mean, unless you find that there's some type of conflict that I'm just not seeing.
Christina, do you see an issue with that? Okay. All right, I think we'll go ahead and vote. If you don't mind voting again, all in favor, raise your hand. All right, motion passes. How do you vote? Oh, I see you. I see you, Julie.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next item, the Legacy Granite Property Owner Sentiment Survey. Doug?
So Mayor and Council, as you remember, this is a project we really started over a year ago. And one of the things we've been working on with Doug McDonald is really addressing a lot of our economic development and spending a lot of time in the business park, really understanding the needs of our site selectors, brokers, property owners. And this comes right on the heel of the city adopting a new comprehensive plan. And as part of that, we heard a lot of feedback and felt like it was time for the city to really understand the needs, the wants, and the concerns of the folks out in the business park. But as we've done with like our listening tour, we wanted to make sure that we did this in a way that really captured the feedback and the sentiment of that without necessarily putting our fingerprints on it. So we engaged Fries and Nichols to go out and do some surveying for us and really capture the sentiment of the business park to help us understand, you know, how to make sure that this stays prosperous and what their opinions are for really making it successful going forward. So with that, we'll turn it over, and Wendy will, with Fries and Nichols, will go ahead and start sharing what they found out with that sentiment survey.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us here tonight. I'm Wendy Bonneau with Fries and Nichols. I head our urban planning and design group. I've been with the firm 20 years. I have behind me David Jones, project manager on this. And as you know, Fries and Nichols has had the pleasure of doing some other planning work for you as we're working on the code, but I will tell you this has been a very cool assignment for us because it was very, very neat for us to be able to go in and ask the opinions of people who live and work and are on the ground every day rather than going in and doing a plan and making assumptions. So I'll go through a little bit about what that summary is, our methodology, what the things we heard were, and then David will go through just a little bit of our takeaways. So the purpose of this, we look at this yellow area as what we're calling the legacy area in Granite Park, both east and west sides, and looking at talking to the owners and the tenants to find out what's going on in this area, what's the trends in office, what are the things that we need to keep this area vibrant? We know we're doing a lot of competing with other cities, and what do we need to be able to do in this area? And so tell us what they see on the ground and what they need, particularly when they're trying to attract tenants to the area. And so some of the driving factors of this, Legacy, Granite Park is a very popular area. It's still very competitive. We only have a few remaining vacant parcels, so we want to be really smart as you're doing future planning about what we do with those areas. We do have a surplus of vacant office right now, which is, you're not alone in that. That's going, that's a trend that's going on everywhere. So how do we look at that? Is there master planning components? Right now, the comprehensive plan looks at a high level, and when you look at this area from a broad brush, you think of Plano, and then you think of this legacy area. So the comprehensive plan is looking at a broad brush. It's generally an office area, but when you get down into a finer grain detail, what does this area need to be? And so that comprehensive plan may not address some of the specificity on some of those ideas. And so that was one of the things that we were looking at with the study. So methodology for this particular thing is we did a kickoff meeting. This was pretty short and sweet project. Started it in February. We then did an online survey as well as stakeholder interviews. And then of course we're bringing that data to you tonight. So again, when we look at this area, we're looking at both sides. Just a quick note, city staff helped us put this together. The yellow area on this map is vacant area. And those blue dots are areas where we have vacancy within buildings. And so we see more bigger blue dots up there than we would like to see today. So just kind of putting some of that together. And then the green hashed area is where there could be undeveloped land in a particular site. So, on a piece of property. So it may be stay green space today, but as those develop, that could become land that becomes usable. So during the survey, we talked to 18 different companies within this area that represented about 28 different individuals. Some of those meetings had multiple people. So you can see up there just a list of the types of people that we interviewed and got their opinion. Thankfully, we had over 50% of the owners participate in this, so we feel like we have a pretty good gauge of what's going on. This is just a sample of the questions that we ask. Wanted to know their impressions of the area, what was their sentiment in the office area, what would they like to maintain or preserve, what do they need more of, what are some of the trends that they're seeing, their relationship to DART and other transportation options, and what should the city focus on as we think about this area and think about knowing that changes are happening, what should we be focused on? So I'm going to break down, these are either specific quotes or things that we heard over and over when we were doing these interviews, and some of this is echoed in the survey that you have in your packet. We kind of broke it down into 3 different segments, and so talking about the business environment, that Legacy is still a premier location, so that's great. Many of the respondents said they would invest here again today if they were doing it all over again. Some owners do want to downsize, but they want to stay in the area. There is a high vacancy and low demand right now, other than for office that is Class A+, meaning that people want an experience. The job is often now competing with the home. And if you can do what you want to do at home and you have everything that you have right there beside you, then the offices are really having to up their game and be able to attract tenant space there. So we want flexibility to be able to blend home and work. That is a trend that is not likely going away. I think everybody reiterated, even though those that had a work remote policy want them to come back. I think the hybrid work remote policy is here to stay. So I think we can count on probably not needing as much office, not needing as much parking, some of those things that go along with that. The other thing that is just probably more of a short-term issue is a lack of private capital in the office market right now. Most of them said that will likely change. That's just kind of where we are right now at this particular time. They would like to see an increase of weekend activity and nightlife. We see that in parts of Legacy East, and we see that in parts of Legacy West, of course. But it's a large area, and so more things specifically within those areas. You have very strong competition from Uptown, Dallas, Frisco. I mean, no surprise to you all. Irving, Grandscape. I mean, there's a lot of competition going on, and so being able to remain competitive in that environment. Knowing office is changing and probably is not going to come back to the full extent that what we saw in the past, because that market is kind of soft. So then when you look at some of the key things that stakeholders said from a physical environment, some of the older office spaces, kind of build to suit and spec offices and legacy, are obsolete. Doesn't feel like that was that old again when those were built, but the demands of the office today has really changed that. They'd like to see a focus on improving walkability. Again, when you look at the area as a whole, you think, oh, it's walkable, it's easy to get around, but it's really auto dominated. So that was a thing that we heard a lot. The competition for higher tenant demands, as I mentioned, that Class AA plus kind of space. They would like to see special and cultural event programming and more open space within the area, programmed open space, being able to program that. Proximity to housing, nightlife, and atmosphere. Community parks and open spaces. And really that surplus office just kind of creates dead zones of activity right now. And so how we can better improve that and activate that space. And then the last one is just regulatory environment, which good timing again as you do update the code. There's definitely some nuggets that we heard that we can take forward into that. But needing for flexibility, again, as the office markets change, being able to bring in new uses. I know y'all brought in some life science uses as a really neat new idea that came in. And so not knowing what exactly is going to replace office, being able to be flexible in your uses. That DART was generally underutilized. There were a few that said, our employees need that, but for the most part, it was underutilized, and some didn't think it was probably used at all. Could be, though, if there was some rebranding and rethinking on that, and then also more on-demand last mile connections, so that when you get, when you land and you get off the bus or you get off then you can get immediately to your office space. City needs to remain competitive with its incentives. And make sure that we're looking at the regulatory delays and permitting and making that easy, because there is a lot of competition out there. Another thing that was mentioned multiple times is just a conference and event space. Need more mixed use development in a variety of housing types from different price points. Parking requirements inhibit the value creation. And then some areas with a surplus of office may need to shift away from that use. So on this next one, this is just a summary. I'm not going to go through this, but we looked at those kind of three buckets, if you will. If you read these not only vertically, but also just horizontally, we tried to make those connections and how some of those key takeaways or themes that we heard, how those relate. For example, that first line, we've got a high vacancy, and the physical environment of some of those offices are obsolete, so we need to maintain flexible uses. So you can kind of read some of those horizontally and see how some of those line up. So with that, those are all the things that we heard repeatedly. I'm going to let David go quickly through some of the key takeaways.
So the goal of this was not necessarily to come up with some recommendations. It was definitely a listening exercise, but on these next few slides, you'll definitely start to see as we go through the key takeaways that there are some action items, some things to pursue and to think about. The first one that we heard from the large majority of the folks that we talked to was an aspect of walkability. Certain areas within Legacy have it. Legacy West shops at Legacy, but the large share of the area does not have a walkable environment. Even areas where there are sidewalks, and in some places sidewalks are missing, there's an auto-dominated atmosphere. And there's kind of two streams of thought from that. One, we heard people don't walk. They get to their office, they have lunch at their desk, or they get in their car and they drive to lunch. They're not walking from one place to another, but also that it's not walkable. So, how do you address that? There's a physical way of addressing that that was in line with the feedback that we heard. That's densifying, adding mixed use, adding residential to close in those gaps, but also to create that more walkable environment by having more people out on the street, not just during office hours, but also off hours in the evenings. To create that environment that is desired by many of the tenants and the folks who work in Legacy and who live in Legacy. So the city has focused on adding those sidewalk connections, but the momentum should keep going so that those connections are being made and that they're also being married to the potential land use changes that would infill some of those sites. Kind of married to that is open space. There was a lot of praise for the natural spaces that have been preserved, particularly around the hospital, as well as some of the private open space, and that's rather formal and well manicured. That was seen as an asset and something that should continue to be built upon, but also having a more centralized space that is connected to those other green spaces that may be publicly owned, it may be privately owned, but publicly accessible, or it may be a combination of both, hence kind of the example of Kaleidoscope Park. But even beyond that, kind of using that as a wow factor for the district, using that as a gathering place for Legacy. And we'll come back to that in a moment in another slide. But traffic was another kind of key takeaway. And I've circled kind of two locations, both along Legacy Drive, one at the toll road and the other one at headquarters, were two kind of pain points that came up multiple times from multiple tenants that as people are starting to come back to the office, or as companies are contemplating bringing more people back to the office, there is a concern about there being traffic issues and backups, particularly along the tollway or as you're coming in off of 121. And as new land use changes were contemplated, particularly in multifamily, certain companies were hesitant to embrace those changes because of the impact that it would have on traffic circulation, particularly in those areas that led to a lot of the concern about densifying those areas. That could be interpreted, as well. We want to keep this office, and we did hear that from certain folks that we want to maintain the office environment, but that was kind of one of the key reasons behind why that was seen as a concern. Related to that, as Wendy mentioned, DART again is not widely used either to get to Legacy or to get around within Legacy or Granite Park. Certain companies have kind of ventured out on their own to create microtransit systems, Apex being one example that we heard has had some recent success. But there was a general desire to supplement any service that gets people to and from Legacy by having something that circulates people within Legacy that is reliable. It may start at certain designated stops. It may be on demand, but something that can be used to get people in and around. But again, having that kind of critical mass that doesn't just depend on office workers, but has a population that uses that service, whether it's during the weekdays or on the weekends. Mixed use development, as was already mentioned, we wanted to put this quote from one of the folks who we interviewed. 54% of office workers prefer to have their work and their home life in close proximity, so that there's a little bit more of a blending between the two, so that the things you can get from working at home you don't give up when you go to work. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're in the same building, but that they're in close proximity and you don't have to rely so much on a car to get around. In certain areas of Legacy where there's existing infrastructure but it's underutilized, that could be a positive change within the area and supplement the land uses that are already there. The feedback that we got, on the whole was not, hey, we need to completely shift away from office. We need to leave that part of legacy in the past. It was just, we've got more office space than we need. We need to supplement that with other uses to start to build out the area. One use that was mentioned multiple times, and it was mentioned in a couple of different contexts, so I want to distinguish between the two, is we heard a lot of companies saying we have to go outside of Plano when we bring all of our employees in. We have big gatherings. There's not enough large conference space to accommodate everyone, so we're losing those folks to other cities. So something like a larger conference center, not something necessarily connected to a hotel, but something larger that could accommodate those large events. But similar to that, but it might be a different kind of venue or a different building, something like a multi-purpose venue where you could have live events, where you could have community gatherings and bring people in from outside the general area. So that could be one building, one venue, could be multiple buildings, multiple venues, but that was brought up by several folks who we interviewed as something that Legacy could use to distinguish compared to what's there today. Similar to that, increased hotel options. Again, when some of these companies are bringing in their executive teams, they often put them up in hotels. The options there are seen as limited or in some cases dated. So there's a desire to maintain what was there, but to augment that with more. That could also perhaps include its own small conference space. In addition to the corporate aspect of it, making Legacy more of a destination with a boutique hotels is something that was seen as lacking within the portfolio of the area. There have been, of course, some successful renovations in the area, so there was a desire to kind of keep the momentum going with that, since that's not only the future of Legacy, but potentially the future of the whole city, is to get into a redevelopment mode that would involve identifying kind of issues between where the code is and how the code handles development versus what's on the ground and what the market is pushing for. In some cases, it may be more office, it may be more research facilities, it may be residential, but building in some processes that would provide flexibility, whether that be parking requirements, sidewalks, landscape buffers, all things that of course it's a great time to look at that since the code is being rewritten. Lastly, Plano's economic incentive position. Obviously, it's not news to anyone that that's an area where there's a bit of a disadvantage compared to some other cities that have more funding that they can devote to that. Obviously, the folks who we interviewed were well aware of that. And again, going back to what Wendy said, there's a desire to invest in the area. They're here. They want to stay in the area. But we did hear a lot about the funding gaps that exist when your tenants in a competitive environment are demanding a lot of things to sign leases. They want a lot of finishes. They want a lot of investment up front from the building owners, but the building owners have been losing equity because office space isn't in demand and isn't as highly valued as it was. There's a lot of hidden costs, particularly revolving around refinishing existing buildings. We heard a lot about the energy code. We heard a lot about making changes and upgrades to electrical systems to bring buildings up to code, and a lot of that kind of drove the incentive conversation. So as we transition kind of away from the key takeaways to kind of what's next, that is definitely something that we heard that the city can kind of wrap their arms around and start to marry up with some of the things that you've been doing.
Thank you. And so council, I want to first thank Wendy Chabet and the Freese Nichols team for their work on this. This was a really quick project for us to be able to assemble 18 companies in Legacy area. Over 50% of the landowners in Legacy participated with this, with either with a survey component or with an in-person interview. So appreciate y'all's work on this. Appreciate the work of our companies here in Plano. This was a time commitment we had to ask of each one of them, to dedicate, to give us input about what they want to see in Legacy. Many of these property owners and companies have spent and invested heavily in our community. We're getting ready to be able to celebrate Frito-Lay's 40th anniversary here in Legacy. So these are several decades of investment in our community. And I think when we made that initial request to these companies to participate in this investment in this survey, they were excited. They were excited to see the city being proactive and being engaging and hearing what their input is going to be for bringing their employees back, making it a fun environment, and continuing to make Legacy really the premier business district in the country. So what we're going to be doing kind of next stage of our outreach, we're going to be following up and kind of giving the companies a recap of what you all heard tonight. One of those things is you probably heard some things in the survey that are things that Christina and I would, if we were in those meetings, would say, well, we're already doing this, or we have this tool already available. We were not in those meetings to be heavily confidential for the companies. And so we'll follow up with some information about our new incentive program that has launched that you all worked on really closely with our companies and with the department. We'll also engage them about the new zoning ordinance rewrite on some of these aspects that will be coming up in the next few months with Christina's team. So we'll do some outreach, kind of circle back with the companies. We'll also do kind of the phase one preliminary work that we'll look at in the next fiscal year. So within the Economic Development Department's budget, there's funding allocated towards doing a next phase. What this phase would be very high level assessment of existing conditions. So what we do is we take the input we heard from the companies, then we come in and actually do some initial analysis on land use, on utilities, on transportation, on some of the aspects that came up in this, just to see what do we need to do to take a further look in the future. Once we get that kind of high-level analysis of existing conditions for the Legacy and Granite Park area, then what we anticipate is actually coming back to you, Council, prior to the next cycle of funding to look at a potential master plan that Council, you all would have the ability to decide to move forward with or not move forward with, and we could take the initial assessment and take some recommendations off that. But really appreciate the time and effort for this, and Mark, Council, happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just have a comment. I really enjoyed listening to the synopsis of the survey. I think a lot of the comments from our office or business residents are very productive. They're very positively productive, and they're very good feedbacks. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are able to summarize it for us. And thank you, Doug, for doing this. And I absolutely, I mean, about everything that you guys talked about with regards to your recommendation, about 75% of that, I was nodding my head going, yeah, that absolutely, oh yeah, that should have happened. So I appreciate the fact that we are moving forward. We are competing with some young chicks on the next door neighbor, so we do need to make ourselves a permanent part of our business and really cater to their needs. That's all I have.
Thanks. Councilmember Prince.
I have two questions. One is on the key takeaways. Were those ranked in any sort of order? Okay. I would love to know either what you learned from the businesses or just y'all's opinion of if, we couldn't do everything, what you think would make the biggest impact or what we could get the most bang for our buck that would, make the biggest difference off of those key takeaways.
You want to answer that, or you want to? Or both can.
I'll take a shot at it. Based just on the volume of, let's say, times that it was mentioned, I'd say it's more small things, or let's say the non, really exciting things like increased walkability. That was something we heard across the board, that this is one environmental change you can make to move Legacy, from kind of the 90s paradigm of everyone drives in and everyone drives out to more of a comprehensive urban environment. And that would, again, have multiplier and spillover effects where it makes it a better place to come and to spend time. It expands that Legacy West kind of model where you want to come and just spend the afternoon and walk around. It expands that to other areas. Maybe not everywhere. Some areas might retain that identity as a business park or as a place where you commute in and out, but multiplying that energy that you get from Legacy West, from shops at Legacy, is probably the first thing that came to a lot of people's minds as we were talking to them.
And I want to say add two things. walkability, it wasn't necessarily just go add sidewalks everywhere. In some cases, it was like, think about the redevelopment of land uses that create more of a walkable environment. Like I said, there's some businesses that you're really close to the shops at Legacy. It's easy to get there. There's others. It was kind of interesting because this was an interesting thing for me, takeaway, because we look at the whole city, right? And then we think of Legacy, Granite Park as this kind of zone. You know, for you as a city, it's kind of this cluster of businesses. But really, when you talk to the businesses, East and West are very different. If you're on the outskirts, if you are really within walking distance of Legacy West, it's very easy. But you can be on the outskirts of that, and you might as well be a mile or two away because you're still going to have to get in your car and drive. So in some of that, I think it is thinking about flexibility of uses that help create that environment.
Thank you. A follow-up question to that is, it seemed like there was some conflicting comments regarding the walkability, the green space, and then the density, right? Some people said, we don't want more apartments. We really like we want more green space, but then we want walkability. So when you say that we want this more urban space, and then we say we want more green space, was the green space more about the programmed green space? Because it feels like Legacy has a lot of green space.
It does.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of green. There's a lot of trees. When they say they want green space, is it what you're saying, Kaleidoscope Park? Like they're wanting it to be something more special with art? What are they wanting?
It's more that activity. It's more that it's more of a programmed use of green space or a park that they can actually use. People enjoyed, the trees and the landscaping and the setback, but sometimes, again, I'm a planner, so I think it's all very walkable, right? But still, when if you don't have that connection between one place to another. So I think it's more of a program space. It's more of event space. It's more of like, we like the green. I didn't hear, let's densify all of this. That was not it. We like the green space. We like the open space. But there are infill projects that could probably happen more often than not. We heard mixed use is a product that people want. I think, like I said, going back to kind of the nuanced look, which I was glad to hear what you're saying. It may be a potential of looking at it a little further, because mixed use may not be appropriate everywhere, or housing may not be appropriate, but in some places it would be perfectly fine because it's different. You really have to look at almost a finer grain than just that map that I showed. Does that help?
Shelby.
Along the lines of what Councilmember Prince was saying about ranking preferences by a number of respondents, did you get a sense of how those rankings broke down by area, like what the Legacy corporate folks said versus the shops at Legacy?
Yes, and so we have all the detailed data with every person we interviewed. We knew where they were located, and we cited it on the map. And so it is different. I mean, these were just some of the key takeaways as a general thread, but I do think taking a deeper dive and looking at where that exactly was located on the map and where some of that feedback would be helpful, because it was kind of different in different locations.
Okay. Yeah.
And yes, we do have all the detailed notes of all of the specific. I mean, I don't know that anybody asked us to be confidential, but we did try to present. We're asking this as a third party to be able to ask this information so that we felt like we could get very honest feedback.
Of course. And this summary is very helpful. Can we get a copy of the report with the? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the copy that you'll receive, I believe, will have kind of the raw survey data that we got to, which is several dozen slides, so we didn't want to necessarily spend time going through
I
all
would
that.
prefer the PowerPoint rather than, a written summary. I like looking at the photos.
We'll get that to you, Mayor and Council.
I'd like the 1,000-page version, please.
There'll be a lot of blank pages in between, but we can make that happen. So we are planning on moving forward with that high-level summary. Again, now that we know this, it's important to understand what's out there and what our constraints may be for considering anything in the future. So phase 2 or phase 1 will be Doug kind of going back and doing that additional study. When we have that, these two things will marry together to present a picture, and then council can make some decisions about future studies. So that's our intent. And with that, again, thank you, Freeze and Nichols. This was fantastic. Again, helpful for us to keep assessing where we're strong and where we can grow, and we'll keep moving forward.
Okay, thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next item is storm debris cleanup report. Hello, Abby.
Good evening, everyone. How are you all? I'm Abby Owens. I'm the Director of Public Works. That was decided on May 20th, and this storm came through on May 28th.
That was not by design. That was not by design.
It's not advancing. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, this is fun. So I just took a few of our photos of the event that we had. So we all use Cartograph in both Public Works and Parks. And so we tried to have our staff take as many photos as they could, and there was over 2,000 that we were able to kind of go through. I think these are a pretty good high-level picture of what they were dealing with every day from the moment that that storm hit. So for us, we really focused on, in Public Works, clearing the right-of-way and trying to make sure that there was access to get to all the homes and businesses in the area. But I couldn't be remiss if I didn't thank all the support from Parks and the fire department as well. I mean, it really was a true team effort from the moment that that storm rolled through. Thank you. So here's just a quick timeline overview. So May 28th, that storm rolled through a little bit before 5:50 a.m. And luckily, all of our staff usually report by 6 a.m. So by 6:30, we already had crews out in various trucks with chainsaws, just responding and going to certain areas. On the 29th, we were able to work through a partnership with one of the businesses. Actually, because of Doug and Peter's great relationships, we were able to identify a secondary debris site for us. We instantly knew with the volume that we'd received that our normal process of taking debris to Custer Transfer Station and grinding it for Texas Pure Products was not going to work. This was significantly more than we could handle. And so we were able to get that a property identified, and a lease agreement was already drafted and ready same day, and we were able to work through that. Starting June 4th, we were able to start delivering debris to that site, which was huge because we didn't have to wait in lines at Custer, plus it gave us that extra site where we could do grinding and hauling. June 10th is when City Manager Israelson came to you all and asked for authorization for rainy day funds so we could use a third-party contractor to help us with pickup. And that was also really important for us, though. Even though we do have rear loaders and we do have a yard debris team and we pulled our streets team to work on these, we really did need that assistance of the contractor, and we could not have completed it in the rate that we did without that. June 17th is when we finally completed all of the calls and requests that we had received. It was just over 1,200 locations for some sort of tree or debris removal. And up until a couple weeks ago, we were still working through some of those that had gone down in drainage easements, and that's why our drainage crews were working on those. July 15th is when we completed that first sweep. So that was basically 6 weeks. It took us to get through the entire city, and we collected just over 87,000 cubic yards. By the 16th, we started our second sweep and were able to complete that by July 29th. We currently have our grind sites still up and going. The contractor probably has another 2 more days of grinding on site, and then about 10 days to haul all the material off site at that moment. So our lease expires at the end of August, and it's just in time because that's when we'll actually finish everything up. Okay, so this is an overhead picture. This isn't even when we had all of the debris picked up. As you can see, we had already started it being ground in the top left corner. And so we collected just around 100,000 cubic yards. And just for reference, because I'm not a spatial person either, is 1 cubic yard is equal to a washing machine. So we basically collected 100,000 washing machines over a 2-month period. And that's a lot. On a normal year, we would basically collect about 22,000 tons of yard debris, which is the equivalent of what this is. So we picked up in 2 months the same amount that we would pick up an entire year. We do still have some piles that are out there that we are working closely with neighborhood services and our other, and our parks department. And so if there are debris piles out there and you're not sure, you can always report it to us. But our environmental waste services team, at this point, we have moved to special collections and paid collections. We picked up everything that was brown, so what's showing up now is green. And so people would need to contact us to go ahead and schedule that special pickup, which would be at a charge. But this is where we've asked if people still see piles, they're not sure, you can take a picture, report it to us on Fix It, but you can also contact Public Works or Solid Waste, Environmental Waste Services at both of these numbers. And we will work through that partnership with Parks and our neighborhood services team to identify whose responsibility it is. So that was my high level.
Casey?
Well, congratulations to you on your new role. This was a great initiation, and now you're ready for all the things that are going to come. So thank you to you and your team. I appreciate all your work. What I want to ask you is, what do you think that you have learned from all of this, and what do you think we need to do differently to be prepared for either this to happen again or something worse to happen? Because looking at that, it took us about 2 months to recover from this, and that wasn't even a real tornado, right? It was bad, but you can say it was pretty close. But what I'm saying is we could get something much worse, right? And so I think we want to be prepared to manage something worse. So what would you say we need to do different in the future, or we need to, from the council standpoint, help you so you can be prepared for something, hopefully that doesn't happen, but that we're ready?
I'll say a couple of pieces we've already identified is we're already looking for a secondary debris site option moving forward. This one was lucky. They're going to be putting a building on this location, so we don't have to restore the parking lot, which is what we had to do at Plano Center before. So we've already started identifying locations. We've gone through the process now with TCEQ, so we kind of have that under our belts and know what to go next. We do have a debris plan, but what we noticed in this one is the debris plan was really made for a tornado, because what you would do is you would instantly know that you're going to hit that FEMA threshold or whatever the assistance threshold is, and you would call in a debris monitor. At that moment, the debris monitor comes in. They're responsible for tracking debris from the moment it's picked up to the moment it's disposed of, and it's a very different process, and that's when you would then seek funds. So that's a couple things, and we've gotten feedback from our residents. So I think the storm map we did was really good. It helped people know where we were going, but we did also learn that we will no longer put out possible timeframes, because that's what we heard repeatedly is, you said you'd be here in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and what happened is, because the debris was down for even 2 weeks, more and more residents would put out other stuff that maybe we hadn't seen that was in their backyards. And so what we thought would take us only a few weeks to get through took us much longer, because, well, the pile's there, I'll just put a little bit more and a little bit more. In a FEMA situation, they would not pick up anything that's green, period. So it would only be what's brown.
And I would just add real quick, Councilwoman, you know, the total cost that we're seeing for the city is about $2.5 million. $1 million of that y'all have authorized, or roughly $1 million of that is coming from the rainy day fund. About 1.2 is coming out of the solid waste fund, and the rest is general fund and others. We still, at $2.5 million, you see the level of effort that we had to have. The federal threshold is up closer to $5 million that we have to be prepared to handle on our own. And so if that threshold, if we come up 4.9 and the threshold's at 5, 100% of it gets funded by the city of Plano. And our rainy day fund right now has about 4.9 in it. So if we have more than one incident, then we are going to have to find ways to be able to respond to that. And what we heard from our citizens, and I know y'all heard too, is faster, quicker, cleaner. And I would echo your statements that the staff did an outstanding job, but we're in the process of working on our after action of this. We do know that debris removal is a big issue. And we do know that that is an expectation, but to your point, there could be more than one. It could be worse. There's a lot that we need to prepare for. So for us, I think having a more robust rainy day fund, and I know we're going to talk about that later, to me is something that I think was also something that I took away from this as the city manager.
Is there something regarding the rainy day fund? It took us till June 10th to get that authorization. I don't know that is there something we can do in a situation where you would need that sooner? Where
Yes.
we could get that faster?
I think that we could call an emergency meeting, or we could talk about certain stipulations that you allow me to use for ratification to come back under certain conditions. But I think that it always needs to come back to the council. I think that's one of the reasons that it was prepared, was to make sure that it's always a council decision. But I think, to your point, time is of the essence when you're dealing with something like this. But truly, getting the streets cleared was the first and foremost issue. So we got a lot of our wildland folks out in fire, got a lot of chainsaw time out there in Plano working with our public works crew. But we think that the faster we can get consultants in, the faster we can get supplemental work in, the faster we can engage in those contracts and have authority to engage in those, the faster we get to restoring the community.
One more question. Is it possible to have somebody those contractors ready to go so that we know this is who we call, they're on speed dial, they're gonna be the ones, so that's not, oh wait, it happened, now we have to get a contract?
We actually have this contract in place. This is actually a contractor that we have. But again, on the after action, we're going to go back and review how they performed as well. So we're going to look at that. We can possibly have multiple contractors because, again, if the bigger the contracts that we have and the more authority we have, we could be attacking it from north and south simultaneously, east and west simultaneously. We can bring in more contractors. So that's part of the response we have. But I think it's also making sure that we're always cost conscious. So we want to look at that too. But those are some of the after action things that I know Abby and her team and Sam and Carrie and our fire department are looking at as well. So we'll bring back some of those recommendations when we get the complete after action done.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question for Abby or for Mark, but regarding that $5 million FEMA reimbursement threshold, the thought occurred to me that this windstorm did not just hit Plano, and obviously I know Richardson had a significant cleanup effort. I'm sure other area cities had a significant cleanup effort. Is there any way, either this time or in preparing for a theoretical next time, that through partnerships with other municipalities or counties or the COG or somebody, that we could aggregate our cleanup expenditures or even coordinate our cleanup effort in such a way that it becomes eligible for FEMA reimbursement?
Well, it's on a county basis, Councilman.
Oh,
so the
okay.
challenge is that Dallas County has a different threshold than we have. And so as this hit, as you remember, we were the hardest hit in Plano, and then it moved south.
Right.
So the county to the south of us had a FEMA claim. We did not. So the challenge is if we can get Mother Nature to participate and agree with us, we can plan this out in a way that works for us.
Send Mother Nature a map next
Will
time.
do.
No, I'm joking. But thank you for that response. That makes more sense.
Shelby?
Abby, I appreciate your holding up under trial by fire. When we put folks in new positions, we like to throw the book at them. Chief Drain, I think we hired him on as chief just before the pandemic hit. So y'all did a great job throughout this, and I kept urging folks patience, because whatever our methodology was in the order of our cleanup, someone somewhere had to be dead last. Are there any, along the lines with Councilmember Prince's question, are there any lessons learned from the order in which we cleaned up, which we might be able to apply in the future? Hopefully not in a worse situation, but whether it's better, worse, or the same. Obviously, clearing the roads is priority number one. Any other lessons learned?
So we started on the east side because that was by far the worst hit side, and we thought that made the most sense at that moment. From what I've received from the many calls and emails between myself and the rest of the team, is people really just wanted us to stick to a time frame. And so if we wouldn't have put out a time frame, they said that would have been even better. But being told, oh, sorry, it's going to be another week, was even more frustrating. But we have discussed, do we do zones instead? So would that be a better way to approach it? That's how we do the cleanup side of it. The removal and getting it to the right of ways, not necessarily the pickup side. But we're kind of limited by the number of trucks and staff that we have. So maybe as we look at additional contracts, that could be something we look at too. Again, our debris plan was really meant for the tornado, which hopefully would only just be like a streak that you'd be doing, not 72 square miles. But it's definitely something we'll include.
Yeah, it was more of a hurricane than a tornado.
It felt like it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Next item is item 5, consent and regular agendas. Any item council member would like to remove?
Removal of item I, as in Israelson.
Okay,
No relation.
all right. Council, next item, council items for discussion, future agendas. Okay. We'll take a recess and return at 7. Thanks. What? That's
That's the dinner.
we could sit at the dinner with our favorite policeman, and then we can.
Yeah, National Night Out on 15.
I'd love it. I mean, because, I really only have proclamation. And I can't, this is my best effort. No, you don't, maybe it's something. Okay, all right. Okay, that's great. I think that's the best avenue for her. I'll figure out that. Yeah, just something that they'll really celebrate. The only other option would be to call, yeah, I know. And that's probably what Mary's doing. And then I'll find out from her. But thank you. That's very kind.
to be here. Keeping us safe. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Thank you. How was your trip, Alice? Wonderful. Well, that's really great. Yeah, uneventful and planned. I'll pray for his continued recovery. Is he completely okay now, or like on the mend? I'll pray for his continued recovery. And I'm glad it was a good vacation nonetheless. I mean, sometimes unexpected happens. I mean, we've had nothing is fearful. It sounds like this is a week. We actually once had after we won, had kind of that was a whole scary thing. Exactly. We were in Mobile, Alabama. You know, by God's grace, University of South Alabama Hospital did a good job. Yeah. And they like just put a scar. Because at that age, I mean, their skin at that age, like if I was to burn myself like that, I would probably be scarred. But you know, I didn't know his skin. Completely recovered. Thank goodness. Because they do get themselves into stuff like that, so it's very very different treated that way. Instead of kind of fix themselves up or be fixed up too. Goodness.
I now declare that the Plano City Council is reconvened into open session, that all members are present. Do we have Deputy Mayor Pro Tem on? Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Holmer will be on Zoom. We'll begin tonight's regular meeting with the invocation led by Reverend Michael Forge, pastor with Prince of Peace Catholic Church. Please join the council reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and Texas Pledge after the prayer. Would you please stand?
Dear Lord, we gather together this evening with hearts full of gratitude for your abundant graces and blessings that you bestow upon us. Thank you for all you have done and continue to do for our beloved city and citizens, for your spirit of wisdom and knowledge and understanding upon our city leaders and servants, and guide them as they guide us toward the future of our beloved city of Plano. May the Lord bless us in all we do. Amen. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Consent agenda.
The consent agenda. The consent agenda will be acted upon in one motion and contains items which are routine and typically non-controversial. Items may be removed from this agenda for individual discussion by a council member, the city manager, or any citizen. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item I.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item I. All in favor? Raise your hand. Motion passes 8-0. Item I.
Item I, to approve an expenditure for engineering professional services for the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program, project number TPS 00017, in the amount of $188,200 $245 from Fair and Piers for the engineering department and authorizing the city manager to execute all necessary documents.
Yeah, I'm Caleb Thornhill, Director of Engineer, here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Caleb. I was just hoping that you could share with us a little bit more about the purpose of this and what led to the need from the citizens for this and what we hope to gain from doing this study.
Sure. So this is a professional service agreement with the consultant. This is to develop, excuse me, the ability to prioritize our neighborhood traffic calming requests. We receive about 2 to 3 per month. Back in 2009, we sunsetted the speed hump program. And then in 2021, we approved funds to recreate that program. It was included in the 2023 Street Design Manual, the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. And so this is the initial step so that when we do receive requests, we can prioritize and address the most critical.
So do we imagine that coming out of this, there will be a need for additional resources to implement this or changes to our current ordinances?
So no changes to ordinance that I'm aware of. The resources we anticipate somewhere between, I think, 100 and 200 a year, $200,000 a year for improvements. It's not just a speed hump program. There's other elements in the manual, but it's also not addressing every single request. That's why this contract is in front of you, is to prioritize those requests. The ones that we feel like there is an important safety concern, we'll address those. The ones that are not will not be included.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick again, thanks, Caleb. Well, this contract right here, is it going to help us develop a plan for us to prioritize future elements here, or is this just a one-time prioritization of what you've already received?
So the plan is for this analysis to guide us moving forward. So once we have this prioritization improvement in place, we will use this as we go throughout the years and prioritizing projects. So this isn't just a one-time for this year. It won't be back for you for next year. This is the plan we're setting in place.
Caleb, good to see you. Just a quick question, and you may not know the answer to this one here, but periodically, we put our remote speed measuring devices, out to slow traffic down and also give us, data on that. Do we know what that costs us when we do that in response to citizen requests versus, doing a new consulting study?
Yeah, so I don't have that cost, what it costs to put out a trailer. But what I can tell you is when that does happen, whether it's a trailer or even a PD presence, we have immediate response. The speed slowed down quite a bit, but it's the resources of putting those out there. It's usually a temporary response. And so this is a longer term solution.
Gotcha. I don't know, Mark, maybe, do you have any data on, I know the resources takes manpower to hook it up and take it out and wheel it out and then go back and collect again. I'm just curious because, almost $200,000, how many times can we just respond with, the radar machines?
I'd have to get a report from the chief. Honestly, in our traffic, typically we have the POP program that we have within our police department to go look at elements like that. But I'd have to get a report from the chief in order to be able to report back, but be happy to do it.
If we delayed this, table this tonight, would that give you a chance, would that delay anything?
I don't know that it would delay it necessarily, but I don't know that the two work in conjunction with each other that way. Oftentimes when we're talking about the traffic trailers, thank you, Mayor.
Right.
Traffic trailers, we're talking about strictly speed on a lot of those elements, and I think that there's other traffic engineering
Yeah, there's cut through traffic, excessive traffic where they've just found this is the new route. The trailers don't really capture that. They really just capture the speed. So this program will go beyond just speeding. Speeding is a huge complaint. It's probably the number one on the list, but it's not the only one that we receive.
Right. But I guess would we potentially be considering doing islands in certain neighborhoods?
So
based
there,
on-
yeah, it depends on the situation. We may look at it and say, the traffic volume does not warrant any improvements. But we may look at it and say this traffic volume is exceeding what this road's designed for. So that's why this is put into place, because we don't want to just subjectively make a decision and put in an island or a chicane or a circle or whatever it may be without having the data to support that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cam. Appreciate it.
So, okay, now that everybody's raised questions, now I have questions. So is this something that is recommended by our police department?
I don't know if I know that answer. It is not recommended. As far as the study itself,
Yes, I mean, we're proposing to spend some money to seek priority or to see whether or not we need any traffic control or traffic calming
Right.
in certain neighborhoods or certain streets, right? I mean, that's pretty much what it means. So is that something that was proposed by the police department, or was it something that was proposed by,
it was proposed by the transportation staff for engineering.
okay? And is this something that's just a segment of what's to come? I mean, are we looking at this as the initial phase? Is there going to be a second phase, a third phase, a final phase? What are we looking at with regard to the entire expenditure when it comes to, and also what part are we looking at?
So I would say you're looking at the initial phase. Well, we'll call it phase 2. Phase 1 was to add it to the street design standards. That's our document that oversees all of our street design standards. In that, we have a section 13 or chapter 13 that includes the neighborhood traffic calming. It has the different options that we would consider, that the city of Plano would consider. It has the initial steps of how you would request an evaluation of your area. This is the next phase to develop a criteria to sort through those requests. And so the phase after that would be, now that we've received, I think it was 21 requests this year for different elements. And right now staff's looked at pieces of them, but this would put in a formal process, takes out all subjectivity out. It would be, here is how we are ranking you, and here's what we feel like is the critical component, here is the safety component, and here's how we rank it.
So is this for the entire city of Plano? So let's say some neighborhood, 10 people call in and says this, people are going way too fast here.
Mhm.
So is that something, then you would put that in and say, okay, well, this is something that we need to look at. But is it for the east side, the entire city? I mean, what are we looking at when we're dealing with?
So this would be for the entire city. This would be the system that we use to evaluate neighborhood traffic calming requests. Because like I said, it could be speeding, it could be cut through traffic, and it could be, excessive vehicles in the neighborhood. So a bunch of different requests that come through. Right now, the only ability for us to address it is to put out a speed trailer or to request PD to send a car out to the area to see if there's anything, or at least to get vehicles to slow down, depending on what's going
So
on.
the next phase would be, once we identify and we figure out there's something that we need to do, then the next phase would be to come back and say, well, these are some of the proposals that we need to implement. Is that what?
Yeah, so the next phase would probably be a design contract.
Okay.
And here are the 8 different locations that we have identified are critical. Here is the solution to those, and here is the design for those, and then put that out to construction, depending on what it was. If it was speed humps, we wouldn't need to do that. We would identify where they need to go and put them in. But just like I mentioned earlier, it's not just speed humps. It depends on the location.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to say, I'm not going to be supporting this tonight, and this is why. I know it's almost $200,000. It's a study that could lead to additional costs that we need. And we're in a tight budget right now that we're going to be talking about tonight. $200,000 here, $200,000 there adds up to more money that we could potentially use to provide our employees with more dollars, our firefighters, our police, that we need to get up to the median rate. So to me, this is something that it's probably a great thing to do, but this may just not be the right time to do it. So I'm not going to be, I'll vote to deny this.
And Cale, I'm sorry, just another piece of advice for whatever it's worth there. One of the other things I think we do have, the portable speed machines that we can put out, but I think another great use that has mainly just volunteer calls would be to ask our PD to task some of our CAP units to be out there in areas where we get multiple calls running radar guns. Because the citizens see a vehicle there.
And we do that already. Yep.
That slows it down
Yep.
considerably. And I know we've tasked that group for other specific actions at times, and they've been a great help. So
Yep.
I'm with Councilmember Prince. It's not saying that we don't need to maybe look at something, but I'm just not sure we want to spend $200,000 this time for another study like this when we have other options available to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
I made a motion to deny.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to deny item I. All in favor to deny the motion, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, motion is denied. Next item.
Public hearing items. Applicants are limited to 15 minutes presentation time with a 5-minute rebuttal if needed. Remaining speakers are limited to 30 total minutes of testimony time with 3 minutes assigned per speaker. The presiding officer may amend these times as deemed necessary. Non-public hearing items. The presiding officer will permit public comment for items on the agenda not posted for a public hearing. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests, length of the agenda, and to ensure meeting efficiency, and may include a cumulative time limit. Speakers will be called in the order the requests were received until the cumulative time is exhausted. Item number 1, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance related to the Downtown Plano Public Improvement District, approving the 2024 O&M Annual Service Plan Update, levying assessments against the assessed property, and establishing a lien on such property, providing for the collection of assessments, creating a charge and lien against the assessed property, providing for penalties for delinquent assessments, resolving matters incident and related thereto, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Tonight, we would like to consider approving the Downtown Plano Public Improvement District 2024 Service and Assessment Plan. As laid out in the plan, we do this every year. It's an annual update. This year will be the first year that the county is going to start collecting the levies for us, and there's been no changes to the plan since last year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff or Michelle? All right. I'll open the public hearing.
There are no speakers on this item.
No speakers. I'll close the public hearing and confine the comments to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we approve agenda item number 1.
I second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 1. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes. Thank you.
Item number 2, public hearing on the fiscal year 2024-25 recommended budget and the fiscal year 24-25 proposed community investment program.
Good evening, Karen Rhodes Whitley. I'm the budget director here at the City of Plano. Tonight, the public hearing is regarding the recommended budget, which is currently sitting at $755 million, and our CIP, or Community Investment Program, is $317.3 million. And it's a public hearing.
there are no speakers on this item.
Close the public hearing. Find the comments of the council.
Yeah, that's for the tax rate discussion. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
No action on that one. So, okay. Item number 3, consideration of a resolution to accept the certified appraisal rolls for fiscal year 2024-25 for Collin County and Denton County and providing an effective date.
Good evening. On this item, this is the approval of the certified appraisal rolls that have come to us from the Collin Central Appraisal District and the Denton Central Appraisal District. I've included all their information for you. The total certified appraisal roll came in at $62.2 billion. 906 was for new construction and 3.9 billion was existing property values going up. And I have a whole slide presentation regarding those numbers that we will view here in a minute. The total increase to your roll was 8.35%. All this does right here is just a vote accepting what they have submitted to you.
So we need a motion to approve a resolution to accept the certified appraisal.
Yeah.
Motion to accept the certified appraisal rolls.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to approve item number 3. All in favor? Raise your hand. Motion passes.
Item number 4, discussion and direction regarding proposed ad valorem tax rate.
Okay, I have a presentation regarding the analysis of what you just approved regarding the certified tax roll. We have received all final information from both Collin and Denton. At the end of the day, your certified value is $62.2 billion. This is up 8.35%. We did have a very substantial increase in our Chapter 42s. They jumped from 3.5 billion last year to 7.5. I did discuss this with the chief appraiser today. This is going on countywide regarding the lawsuits that are happening. What happens is they go through, they protest, they go through the ARB hearings. Well, now the legislature has changed some of the rulings, especially most of these are commercial values, by the way. They go to a tax agent, a tax consultant. Instead of even going to the ARB, they are filing court orders requesting that the court look at their values. And that is why we are seeing such a large jump. I will tell you on the truth and taxation, the tax roll stuff that I had to do the other day, the state has changed. We are not writing off that 7.4 anymore. We're writing on off the disputed value, which ended up $600 million. So we lost about 0.30 cents on our tax rate just from that. So it's not as bad as what it used to be. They have changed this a lot since Senate Bill 2 was adopted. You have going into the TIF this year, 1.3 billion is going in there, or $5.6 million. This is up about 1.3 million from last year. Your total available to be spent amongst the general fund and the debt service fund is $240 million. And this is at the newly proposed, you remember when we first, the city manager first did the recommended budget, the tax rate was 41.76 because we had not received the certified values. Since then, we have received the certified values. I'm going to discuss the different rates here in a minute, but this number is based on a tax rate of 41.25 cents. Another slide I wanted to show you, the market value. Now this does not have any homestead exemptions out of it. Jumped from 564 to 579. That's about 2.7% increase. You have total exemptions now of $15 billion that are coming off the roll. Revenue savings from the exemptions total $63 million, and our 65 and over tax freeze did increase $3 million, so now savings from that, revenue savings from that total $10.7 million. As far as your new growth, residential only accounted for 7% of the new growth. We know we're basically reaching build out on residential. Last year was 9%. Commercial accounts for the new growth was 93%. Last year was 91%. The existing property values went up $3.9 billion. Residential only accounted for 34% of that new existing value increase. Last year, that was 63%. Commercial accounts accounted for 66%, and last year it was 37%. We still are running 50% for residential, 50% for commercial, which is a very nice spot to be in. As far as where the revenue is coming in from, 240 is coming in for the general fund and geodebt fund. Out of that, $120.8 million, or 50%, is coming in from single family residents. Commercial is 92.1 or 38%. Multifamily is 27.5 million or 11.4%. And you will see here I have what all these numbers were last year, 23-24. Now we'll go on to the tax rate. As you know, we follow Texas property tax laws, truth in taxation is what it's called. 4 guiding principles. Property owners have the right to know about their increases and to be notified an estimated value for their taxes. A taxing unit must publish its no new tax rate and its voter approval rate before adopting the actual tax rate, and that's why we're here today. We need to get a proposed tax rate to put on the form that will be going into the paper this week. A taxing unit must publish special notices and hold 1 public hearing before adopting the tax rate. Tonight is the public hearing on the budget and the CIP. It used to be before Senate Bill 2, we had 2 public hearings on the tax rate. Now we are down to 1. We do have that scheduled for September 9th. However, last year you did include an extra one, so we could have that on August 26th. It's y'all's preference. And then a taxing unit is required to hold an election if you go over the voter approval rate. Okay, here are your rates. The current tax rate right now is 41.76 cents. 30.26 cents is going over to the operating side. The debt side is 11.5. Now the debt cannot be changed now. Once all this paperwork is submitted, we cannot do anything with the debt rate. You do have to pay your debt first. Your no new revenue rate is 39.72 cents. The voter approval rate without the increment is 41.25 cents. And then the voter approval rate with the tax increment is 42.93 cents. Now I'm going to provide you with more information regarding each rate. The no new revenue rate is calculated. It's the rate that provides the taxing unit the same amount of revenue as we received last year. It's the relationship between last year's revenue and current year's appraised property value. So it's at 39.72 cents. If we were to go down to the 39.72 cents, we would have to eliminate nearly $10 million out of the operating budget as it sits today. And I have a slide all about that here in a minute. Let's talk about the voter approval tax rate. I know that we had a lot of confusion last year when the Senate Bill 2 passed on the voter approval tax rate. They had included at the last minute that you could add in this tax increment. Nobody knew what was going on the first couple of years. They said we didn't have to use it. Well, now everybody's saying we have to use it, and we started using it last year. At the end of the day, the way the law is written, your voter approval tax rate is the no new revenue rate times 1.035 cents, because that's the amount they're going to allow you, plus your current debt rate plus any unused increment. Now, let me show you what all this means. The voter approval tax rate without the tax increment came in at 41.25 cents. So this is without the tax increment. Senate Bill 2 changed all this, and they told cities, well, you can go up the 3.5%. In addition, state law allows for you to provide an increment that can be applied for 3 years. The council must publish, the city has to publish what the voter approval rate is with the tax increment in it. So when I went out and did all the calculations the other day, it comes up like that. So we cannot go in and publish that 41.25 cents. That may be what you want to put out there as the actual proposed rate, but the 42.93 cents is what is going to be published as your voter approval tax rate. This is a form. I know you cannot read it, but at the end of the day, last year we came before y'all and we had 2.94 cents that could be utilized to go over your voter approval rate. Everybody decided to use 1.16 cents of that, and we passed along 41.76 cents. So that year's gone. So that is year 2023. We still have some cents left over from 2022 and 2021. Long story short, you got 1.68 cents that can be utilized if you decide to do something with the tax rate. So that's basically what that chart is saying up there. Now, let's go to the next slide real quick. I mentioned before your no new revenue rate is 39.72 cents. If we decided to adopt the 39.72 cents, we need to go look for $9.8 million to reduce the operating budget. The voter approval rate without the tax increment is 41.25 cents. Now, to get there, the city manager's recommended budget had 41.76 cents. In order to come up to the 41.25 cents, we eliminated the $2.8 million, which was recommended to go into the rainy day fund. If you do that, we can get down to the 41.25 cents. Now, the voter approval tax rate with the tax increment is 42.93 cents. If for some reason y'all decided to go there, it would provide you an extra $10 million in the general fund. So tonight, we have a city manager recommended rate of 41.76 cents. Since we did all the truth in taxation, we have revised that down to 41.25 cents. Where's my form? Uh-oh. Oh, never mind. We'll get to that here in a minute. So sorry. Okay, so anyway, those are your rates. Let me show you what it does to the average home. Your average home last year was $373,048. Now, this is the taxable. This is not market value. This already has all the homestead exemptions, all the exemptions out of it. Your new average taxable value is $417,641. If the 41.76 cents is maintained, the average taxable value would increase $186 for the year. Now, if you go down to the no new revenue rate, the difference between the 41.76 cents all the way down to 39.72 cents, the average homeowner is still going to have a tax increase because their home value went up. So this is $101 for the year. By going to the voter approval rate without the tax increment to the 41.25 cents, you would lower the tax rate down by 0.51 cents, and the tax bill for the average homeowner would go up $165. If for some reason it was thought to go to the actual voter approval rate with the tax increment, the average homeowner would see an increase of $235. Tonight, there must be a record vote on what the proposed tax rate is going to be. To schedule the public hearing, we have to do this tonight because if you are proposing any kind of rate over the no new revenue rate of the 39.72 cents. The notice I'm about to show you has been filled out at the 41.25 cents. It will be published August 15th in the Dallas Morning News. And we're going to discuss that rate here in a minute. We need to determine regarding the property tax public hearing. Right now I have it scheduled for September 9th. And the City Council is scheduled to vote on the budget, the CIP, and the tax rate on Monday, September 9th. This is a form. I know it's very difficult to see, but basically at the end of the day, I need to know what the City Council wants us to put the proposed tax rate, which is that top line. The second line is the no new revenue rate of 39.72 cents, and then the voter approval rate is the 42.93 cents. So the reason why we are here this evening is to put in that proposed tax rate. Now, on that, you cannot go up for whatever tax rate that we publish in the Dallas Morning News. You can go down, but you cannot go up. And this is just the back of the form. I know it was very difficult to read. We have to put in what our average homestead taxable value is, the taxes on the average homestead, and then the tax levy that we're going to get from the properties. So that's where we are this evening.
All right, Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm passing around some slides. I think there are a number of numbers in here and trends that I think will be beneficial for us to all be aware of, but my promise to the council is 7 minutes or less, or it's free. And I promised Mark, there you go, please do start your timer. I promised Mark that I would give this caveat. The numbers in here are drawn from what the staff provided, but the characterizations are my own. So if y'all would turn the page, first, this is probably the most important slide, budget trends. Here's a summary. At 41.76 cents, last year's tax rate, the average homeowner property tax bill would be up a full 12% from $1,558 to $1,744. And that's even though the general fund would only be up 0.4%, and the combined budget, net North Texas Municipal Water District, would only be up 2.3%. So how can that be? You know, I mean, when we're looking at you know, the average homeowner, and again, I put that in quotation marks because this is the average homeowner who only has the homestead exemption, who doesn't have the senior tax freeze or any other exemptions, but their tax bill would go up 12%, even though the general fund would only be up 0.4%, and combined budget net of North Texas Municipal Water District would be up 2.3%. Even at 41.25 cents, the average homeowner property tax bill would be up 10.6% from $1,558 to $1,723 and the percentages for the general fund and the combined budget net of the water district would be the same, 0.4 and 2.3. Either way, it will be the biggest increase in the average homeowner's property tax bill in the past 20 years in Plano, pursuant to the spreadsheets the staff sent out by email this past Friday. So that's something that's sobering to me, that even with comparatively little growth in those two budget areas, the average homeowner with only a homestead exemption is really getting hit hard here. The next few slides are just kind of backup for these numbers. I'll skip over them, except to say that if you do look back to 22-23, that's a year where the story was a bit different from these past 2 years in terms of budget growth, being less, and the average homeowner's property tax bill increasing less. Then if you get to the next slide, after those charts, in high inflation environments like the last 3+ years, funds in the Treasury lose purchasing power over time due to the constraints of the Public Funds Investment Act. The staff provided some information that I don't know if it's been sent to the whole council in response to a question I asked, but since January 1st of 2021, the return on funds in our Treasury has been significantly less than inflation. It was under CPI inflation for every single year from 2021 to 2024, way under MCI inflation in 2021 and 2022, and only slightly above the municipal cost index inflation for 23 and 24. This means that every year since 2021, the funds in our Treasury have lost purchasing power compared to CPI, and over those 3.5 years in aggregate, they've lost purchasing power compared to the CPI and the MCI in aggregate for that 3.5 year period. And I want to just say, because this is important, this is in spite of excellent management by our finance team, and is not due to any lack of performance on the finance team's part. They're doing excellently. It's due to the constraints of the Public Funds Investment Act that really constrain what we can invest in. Why do I bring that up? It's because the proposal for going to 41.76 instead of 41.25 is to put more in the rainy day fund, and I just wanted to give context for what has in recent years been happening to funds that are sitting in our Treasury because of high inflation and the Public Funds Investment Act. We're not able to keep up with inflation. The next slide is a chart kind of showing these numbers just to illustrate that. I mean, you can see, for example, 2022, our cumulative aggregate return on funds, that's the third kind of chart at the bottom of the page, 1.7%. The MCI was 10.2% that year for inflation, so we lost a lot of purchasing power. That's the most extreme example, but it's important to be aware that in general, in a high inflation environment, this has been the trend. Then moving on to the next slide, this budget is clearly not a sunny day budget, the opposite of a rainy day budget. We're facing significant fiscal challenges. I mean, everyone knows the budget contingency plan has been activated. In a first that I can recall, there are no raises in this budget for staff, though there is a $1,000 bonus in December for all staff members. And then, of course, we've seen a hiring freeze, except for public safety and maybe one other limited exception. And so we're clearly not in a sunny day budget. I think I would submit we're in a rainy day budget. And I would, on the next slide, say that our rainy day fund should be replenished over time with sunny day excess funds. The state rainy day fund, I reached out to one of our state reps about this, was not built by taxing more than otherwise would have been the case. They dedicated some oil and gas revenues and overages in state sales tax revenue because those revenues are uncertain. I think we could do the same thing going forward with our excess sales tax revenue as that materializes, and other kind of one-time revenue sources. The next slide, the rainy day fund should be replenished over time with sunny day excess funds. We obviously don't intend to use it every year. It's not a routinely used fund. We can build it up over time rather than trying to replenish the entire amount from this windstorm in 1 year. If something happens sooner than that, we still have the flexibility to use fund balance and set the tax rate where it needs to be next year for FY 25 through 26. And I would submit that taxing residents more now to prevent a scenario where we have to tax them in the future is unnecessary. On to the last slide, the rainy day fund should be replenished over time with sunny day excess funds. We have a fund balance already baked into the budget of over $28 million per our 30-day working capital financial policy, and providing cushion is a purpose of that fund balance already. This is already more than 10 times the rainy day fund allocation under consideration, and the alternative is to bust through the voter approval rate for the 1 year voter approval rate for the second year in a row. I want to say that in deciding between these two tax rates, we are not talking about anything that would put money into or take money out of our employees' pockets. The only difference would be money put away in the rainy day fund. I support the rainy day fund. I support funding it in the usual way through saving the excess funds from sunny days, but I don't think that we need to do this year. It is important to be ready for another emergency. It could be next year, but we already have a programmed fund balance of over $28 million per our financial policies. We could use any sales tax excess at the end of the fiscal year each year. That would be more similar to how the state is doing their rainy day fund, and it would allow us to do it without busting through the 1 year VAR and using increment for the second year in a row.
All right.
So there you go,
Thank
7
you.
minutes. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you. Any,
Thank you for the 5 seconds.
anybody else? Shelby?
I think everything that Councilman Riccadelli laid forth is salient. I think it makes sense. I championed the rainy day fund originally, and I also would like to understand where we have lost revenue in the past couple of years. So we saw, if I remember the number correctly, it was $1 million less this year from exemptions. And I believe that's a net loss. That's not just, it's not growing as fast as we would have expected. Okay, so that's three.
Sorry, 3 million just in the senior freeze. So it wasn't one on the exemptions. It may be one, but the 3 million in the freeze. But we also have development related revenue is declining. We have a number of areas where we actually have seen a decrease in revenue over the last several years. So we're happy to provide you that. But the biggest chunk that's happening right now, in addition to the freezes, as I mentioned, with Chapter 42 is another one. We also have the public facility corporations coming off the tax rolls. We have a decline in development-related revenue, and those are all contributing to the issues that we have.
And that's what I was going to, one of the things I was going to bring up, the public facilities corporation's loss. Do we have the latest net loss from that?
We do not. At this point, we're still about $2 million a year.
Okay.
Roughly.
Okay, so the point I was going to bring up writ large is Karen, and thank you for that presentation, Karen. Karen had showed that even with the no new revenue rate, there would still be a little over, a hair over $100 increase to homesteaded homeowners' property taxes. So you can ask, with no new revenue, how could that be? That's still about a 6.4, 6.5% increase in the property taxes. And part of it is due to these things: the additional loss from exemptions, the public facilities corporation's money just going completely out the window. It's just poof, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And so it's the unwitting homeowner, the unsuspecting homeowner that's having to make up for this. But that's only part of the story, is because we're looking at the homesteaded rates for homeowners, but that's only half of the total tax rolls. The other half are broken up between what we would traditionally think of as commercial, meaning businesses, and multifamily. And folks who rent, whether it's a single family home or apartments, they don't get any of the exemptions. They don't get any of the freezes. They don't get any other protections under property tax law. They get punched full in the face with every bit of property value increase every year. Which is also going to kind of make up for these gaps, the loss of development revenue, the exemptions, and the public facilities corporation. So all of that to say, which was a separate comment from the rainy day fund. I'm sorry, Councilman Riccadelli. All of that to say, as we look at these tax increases, understand, this is to the general public, understand that some of the dynamics we're working under are removing revenue from our rolls that have been there before. The money has to come from somewhere, either by making cuts, which we're doing, or increasing taxes, which we're also doing, trying to meet in the middle. It's one thing when you have at least a baseline revenue every year and you either go up a little or go up a lot, or maybe don't go up at all. But when you're actively losing these sources of revenue, in order to maintain the excellent state of city services that y'all have come to expect. We need to make sure that comes from somewhere. Regarding and I would like those breakdowns, by the way, please, from where we've lost all of that revenue. Regarding the rainy day fund, I'm a little on the fence because I agree that we shouldn't necessarily be increasing taxes to make up for the rainy day fund, and I do agree that we have the 30 days of working capital in reserve. And I think we should probably stick to that. On the other side of the fence, we're involved in a lot right now as a city, and I've picked a few fights myself, which I'm cognizant of, and I want to make sure that we can roll with the punches effectively, because those fights aren't arbitrary. They're in the long-term best interest of the city. But we are, as we've spoken about a couple of meetings now, fully transitioned from a growth city to a mature city, and that comes with a lot of gear shifting. And we're not done with shifting those gears, and it's going to involve some pain.
Anybody else? I appreciate your presentation, Anthony. I appreciate it. We all do. And I for one would support the city manager's rate at 4176, keeping it the same, and really only using part of that increment. But again, if you don't use it in 3 years, it's gone. And those are also some lessons learned when we were doing no new revenue year after year. So I support the 4176. It remains the same, and at the same time, it kind of helps us recover from what happened to us this year in the rainy day fund, and at the same time, we still, as Shelby said, we still have a lot of cuts that we've done over this budget period that are going to be tough, and so I think for the city and what they've taken on just to kind of take care of the storm's issues just shows what a great city we live in, and I want to continue to be able to protect the city when we have kind of a tragic moment and we're able to help our community. Casey?
So I don't know if I'm fully ready to say tonight whether I'm for that tax rate or not, but I will say that I think if we are going to go with that tax rate, a couple of things we need to be able to tell both our employees and our citizens. One, we have to be able to show, I think, that we have done everything we can to minimize costs that are unneeded in our budget, both for our employees who were saying we can't afford to give you a raise this year, because it goes back to the conversation about the 200,000 here, the 200,000 there. If you're a frontline employee that is seeing, oh, you can't give me a raise, but we're spending money on this, we're spending money on that, and they think this might not be worthwhile, you could put that money towards giving me a raise. I think that's hard to swallow. Same thing with a citizen, right? If they are out seeing that we've asked them to pay more and then they see us spending stuff on things that they think could be somewhat trivial, then that's hard for them to swallow why they're paying a higher tax bill. So I think it goes both towards the internal morale of the organization, but also to our citizens. So I think it's important that we are able to show that. I also think with the rainy day fund, I don't know if that's something that we can go to our citizens and say, we're raising the tax just so that we can replenish this. So I'm not sure if we may need to go with something to the point that Anthony's making or others, if that's something that I feel strongly enough about, if there's things that we can do over time to get there, or if there's other things that we feel like we really need to make this impact in our city that would make more sense to spend the money on for that tax increase.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
All right, so every year I'm the bad person. I always believe that we need to, when we publish the rate, we need to be the highest that we can be, because we can always come down, but we can never go back up. Am I correct, Karen? So, I can't, I'm sorry, can you? Whichever one.
Oh, yay. Anyway, yes, y'all will actually decide what your rate is going to be on September 9th. All we're doing tonight is the top rate you're thinking of, whether it's 41.76, it's 42, whatever you're thinking, and then September 9th, you
We
will
could
adopt
final-
what it really will be.
We could finalize whatever it is that
That
we
is
believe it is,
correct.
so that would also give us a little bit more time
That is
to
correct.
readjust and to recalculate. And
Yes.
I've every year I said, let's do it, you know, just to be safe. And every year I'm told no. So, so I'm still going to be that way. I believe that we don't need to self-restrict at this time. We definitely do need to self-restrict on September. That's my understanding. And the reason why I believe that that is critical, especially this budget, is because exactly what Councilman Prince just said. We're doing a lot of hiring freezes. We're doing a lot of tightening the belt. But really, what we probably should be looking at is what are some of the things that we can restrict that will allow us to give the need for a increase in our salary for the current employees that we have. I mean, hiring freeze is great because we're not getting new employees, but taking care of the ones that we have now is very important, because retention is the most beneficial and the most efficient use of any type of funds. If we can retain, it is so much better than hiring new employees. We save a lot of money just by doing that. So that is something that I would like to see happen, where we could see whether or not we could squeeze out some of the money to actually allow for, I mean, even if we can't, you know, we can't come up with the average whatever salary increase, but something to show that we really are trying. We really are trying to keep the employees that we have because we really appreciate them. So that's number one. Number two, about the rainy day fund. Look, we didn't know that this hurricane or storm came through city of Plano, and that was a surprise. And who knows what the next thing is going to be? Is it a demonstration? Is it a riot? Is it a storm? I mean, we don't know. And that's what the rainy day fund is all about, is to prevent us from going into our budget and eating our own in order to pay for something that we didn't expect. And I really do believe that in all businesses, and City of Plano is a business, we have to have a buffer. We can't keep cutting. I mean, Karen, how many years have I said, you know, are we down to the bones? And you keep saying, yes, we are. I mean, at least 3 years that we've been doing this. Are we cut down to the bone? Yes, we are. Well, we can't do that in running a business. In all businesses, we have to have a buffer, just in case. And if we don't use it this year, then great. We won't plan it for next year. But we've got to have something. This cutting down to the bone and then tightening our belt is just not something that is very conducive in running a city of excellence. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Councilman Riccadelli for the slide presentation he gave. It's well thought out, well presented. I'm sure you got a lot of information from Karen here.
Oh, big time.
And thank you again. Thank you for your presentation on that. It is eye-opening, but I do want to remind everyone that one of the main reasons why a lot of our residents, their tax bill went up is the value of their home went up significantly. And we've seen that trend, and the reason why, people want to live in the city of excellence. And why are we the city of excellence? Because we give outstanding service. We give outstanding service. And there's a cost to that. And that cost is labor and materials. Our frontline employees, our first responders, they're the best in the state. We've always said that. And there's a cost to that. So, you know, I'm like Councilwoman Prince here, I'm not really ready to commit to it, but when we use 4176, that's still one of the lowest rates in the North Texas area. And so if we keep that in mind, that we keep our tax rate flat, and keep in mind that we still have to pay our frontline workers to keep that service here, we have to go back and say, where do we cut the costs? And like Councilwoman Prince said, $200,000 here, $180,000 here. That's really where we're going to need to start being more mindful in the future of what we need to look at here. But again, I'm kind of looking at the city manager's approach here, where we're at. The rainy day fund, I'm kind of happy where it's at right now. And I think if we get a surplus in our tax revenue, maybe that's where that surplus goes. But I'm not sure I'm ready to bump up rates just to replenish the rainy day fund. That just doesn't make good policy sense to me. But anyway, that's where, in my opinion, where we ought to be moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor. It's great to be last sometimes. I think I've heard some great comments from Anthony. Again, thank you for putting this together. I mean, you put a lot of time and work in it. It makes a lot of sense. Karen, you and your staff, I know with Mark, put in a lot of work bringing this together. I mean, you don't just materialize 800 pages. I mean, that's input from everybody. Even publishing, and that's all we're doing tonight, is setting our published rate at 40. It would stay at 41.76. I mean, let's face it. There's other cities in our North Texas area, they're over 70 cents. I mean, we are, if not the lowest, we're among the very lowest anywhere in the region. I'm like, Councilmember Horn, I do not want to see us cut services. At our 41.76 rate, we provide superior services to a lot of cities that have much higher tax rates than we do, and I don't want that to change. I want to be certain, and as you know, my prime focus has always been public safety first, infrastructure. We've got to be certain, as Councilmember Prince was saying, that we take care of the people that provide those services for us. And until we've done that, we don't need to be doing other things, whether it's a little bit we cut tonight or some other things here. But I'm all in favor of, I think your rate is fine. Let's publish that. We'll have a meeting on Thursday night. We'll have more discussion. When we get together in September, that's when we'll put all the facts together and make the decision. So I'm good with the 41.76.
Is that the recommended rate or the
That is
revised rate?
Yes, that is correct. That is what the city manager included. Yes.
That's the recommended rate.
41.76, yes.
So council, a lot to unpack. Councilman?
Just a comment, and maybe we'll get into this more on Thursday, but if we are to go with the recommended rate of 41.76, then I think I'd rather put that money toward making sure we can be on par with the compensation study across all of our staff rather than replenishing the rainy day fund.
I'm okay with that too.
Okay. Across all of our staff.
Yeah, to the greatest extent possible.
Across all our staff.
Across the board.
And we can do that. So let me back up a little bit, because as I said, there's a lot to unpack with all the comments here. So first of all, number one, thank you, council, for recognizing the situation we're in. I appreciate the seriousness that all of y'all are putting into this and the thoughtfulness of putting together presentations and all your comments back to the city. I assure you this is still the best city in North Texas to work for, and there's still a lot of great things going on, but we need to change some things. And so we are working on looking at what those adjustments to expenditures and policies and everything else should be. We're working on that through our fiscal roadmap, and we're going to bring back a package to council to consider adjustments and changes to our expenditures, to some of our policies, to some of our contributions. We're going to look at a lot of different things that we're going to bring back, because candidly, going forward, Those are adjustments that we have to make to ensure that our revenues and expenditures are in alignment with what the needs are of the community and of our employees. Couple quick things to make sure we're pointing out. 37% of the households in Plano, 37% of the homesteads in Plano, regardless of what you do going up, will not experience an increase. That is the number of senior freezes we have. Over the next 3 years, 4,500 more will be added to that list. We will be at, I thought it was gonna take till 2035 for us to have 50% of our homesteads be in a senior freeze. I was wrong. Looking at the recent numbers, it's 2030. We lost 5 years. That means every time we want to pass along 3.5%, you get 1.5% or 1.75% back. So we are in a position now that as we're talking about tax rate, we're talking about impacts, we need to be real about what the facts are and what's going on in our community. We have a lot of people retiring in Plano. That's great. That's great. Great folks retiring in the city. But we have a policy that is limiting the ability to pay for some of those services. It's hard to give 3.5% increases in salaries if we're only getting 1.75% back in the revenue side of things. So we just need to be aware of what we're facing with that, because that is where we're moving. And in 2030, 50% of the households in Plano will likely be in that senior freeze. So we face some challenges. If you want to talk about taking the $2.8 million that we had going to the rainy day fund and talk about spreading it across the employees, I completely am fine with that. I have no issue with it whatsoever, because make no mistake, that's where the work gets done. This is balancing right now the freeze. The freeze is having an impact on our folks out there in the field, on the people answering the phones, and on people responding to services. A freeze impacts our services, and I am sensitive to balancing this on the backs of employees. So if we want to take that and take that out of the rainy day fund, I have no issue with giving that to the employees at all. I think it's a great move, but I would say it needs to go across all employees, because every employee out there, whether they're reading a water meter, picking up a phone, putting out a fire, whatever, they are providing services that are needed in this community. The other thing that it could be used for is removing the freeze. The hole that we're filling is around that $2.8 million. So we could actually fill those positions. I honestly think that taking care of our employees that are here right now is the most important thing, but make no mistake, with that increased workload and fewer workers, it's still getting balanced with the employees. So I have no issue with it whatsoever, and I'm happy to consider that. But we do have $1,000 per employee already budgeted in the budget, so that's still in there. So this would be in addition to that $1,000, and maybe we're talking about twofold, kind of a smaller percentage, and still the $1,000. Happy to consider that, because council, this matters to making sure that we stay a desired employer, that we're taking care of those folks that are in the field, and that they're actually getting the compensation that will keep us competitive. But I will say one last thing. Let's not mistake the hourly wage for compensation. Wage is one piece of about 10 elements of compensation. We also have longevity still happening. We still have, plenty of things happening with, vacation buyback, sick leave buyback, all these different things, step plans. We have a lot of different things in there that we do have that are still taking care of employees. But our employees are our greatest asset. So if we have any chance to take care of our employees, I'm for it. Last thing I'll say, the fund balance discussion is a tricky one. Council has financial policies that says we're going to maintain 30 days. My concern with using the fund balance as an emergency fund, which it is there for, is the consequence thereafter, because you have to have an election of your citizens. If you have to tap into that in a material way, you still run into that 3.5% increase that we have on the voter approval rate. And if you have to go above that, that requires an election of your citizens. If they don't pass it for any reason, you have violated your own policies and you're immediately in a cost-cutting mode. It presents a quagmire and a challenge just on a fiscal side of things. I'm not saying you can't do it, council. Council can make that decision of the risk that they're willing to take. But I think of that windstorm and what happened. I think of an emergency, of a huge incident that happens in the community, and those are the things that keep me up at night. And I can tell you all the bad things I think about when I think about the potential, but I appreciate y'all's approach to things. We're happy to bring back options if you would like us to do that. It sounds like 4176 has a general consensus. I'm being careful about that. But we're happy to bring back some options that we can use. But if y'all want us just to apply that across the board, council, you have my support.
and I know I already used 7 minutes and 5 seconds, so I'll be quick. But I just want to say I'm okay with providing notice at 41.76 cents. Obviously, like Councilmember Prince and Councilmember Horn and Councilmembers Williams and Smith, I think just about everybody said I can't commit to that rate or 41.25 tonight. I think we need to keep analyzing. But one of the main points of my presentation was that I just don't think that we can sock $2.8 million away in the rainy day fund and go over the 1-year voter approval rate to do that in the same budget where we're telling employees there's no money for raises. And so, to me, and again, not committing to what rate we should be at, but if we're gonna be at 41.76 cents, I'd rather see us use it for employees, as several council members have alluded to. I'm sensitive to the consequences of, burning into the fund balance and still hitting the 3.5%, voter approval rate for the next year. But I still think, when we have such pressing needs presently, trying to get all of that back in 1 year just isn't consistent with how rainy day funds are normally funded. They're normally funded a little bit at a time through excess revenue during those sunny day budgets. So anyway, that's just my comments, and I'll vote to publish the 41.76 cent rate.
Do you have any thoughts? Sorry. Julie, do you hear me?
Oh, yes, I didn't hear my name. I'm sorry. No, I agree with everything that's been said. I with the only exception, Maria, to your point about retention of employees, I think City Manager Israelson alluded to this, that, when we happen to hit a department with a hiring freeze that's already short-staffed, then that potentially could affect our retention when we overwork our people. So that was really about the only thing that was said that I maybe didn't agree with. I also feel that it would be smart to go ahead and publish at that higher rate and then continue to assess and decide what the best decision is. At being a mature city that we are, it's kind of like financial planning 101. You sit down with your planner and they say, where are you at? What's your risk? Your risk reward, how comfortable are you with things? And we're kind of at that mature end now where I feel like we need to be more conservative. We need to put the money aside because we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't have that growth coming that's going to allow us to have the sunny days quite as easily as we have in the past. And so for that reason, I see that as a conservative move that I would be more comfortable with to put those funds aside. So I'm comfortable with the 41.76 as the published rate, and taking some more time to consider final decision on that.
Thank you.
Just
Shelby?
real quick, I have to have a record vote.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting
So
there.
sorry.
Trust
Oh,
me.
so sorry.
I've been working on that for the last 45 minutes. And now I have to deal with Shelby here.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we're a mouthy bunch. No, I just want to point out that, and I'm all for exercising restraint and not burdening our taxpayers unduly. Our rainy day fund, unlike the states, didn't exist when we had sunny days. Just like we had a few sunny months when the rainy day fund was created before it really started raining. So our ability to contribute to that has been very limited since its inception. Likewise, when bad things happen, we have a lot less flexibility than the state to deal with them. So just want to highlight those differences between our rainy day fund and the states.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to publish the city manager's recommended rate, which is 41.76 cent.
Second and third.
Did you get that? Okay, so I have a motion and a second to publish the 41.76 rate. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Karen, excuse me, Lisa, item 5.
Item 5, discussion of the proposed 2024-25 Community Investment Program.
Yes, this is the item to go over what is included in the Community Investment Program for this next year. The total's $317.3 million. Out of this, $119 is for street improvements. 59 is for Parks and Recreation, Water and Sewers 53, Capital Maintenance 43, and Municipal Drainage 20. The fund is, or the Community Investment Program is funded by a series of debt funds and cash. This next year, we do plan on issuing $85 million. That's going to be our bond sale next spring to go towards these projects. Now, once that is issued, we will be out of street funding. So as y'all know, we are starting the May 3rd, 2025 bond referendum program with the BRCAC, our Citizen Advisory Committee. We're starting that in the next couple of weeks. We have included within the water and sewer revenue side an $80 million revenue bond to be sold. We have several very, very large projects included for water and sewer. As you know, we have been on pay-as-you-go since 1993. We hardly ever issue debt unless it's for major, major projects, and we have several of them that they will be coming up and talking to you about here in a minute. We also have scheduled a $5 million bond sale, revenue bond sale for municipal drainage. It's just a small one. We are waiting for the stream bank erosion study to come back in. We probably are looking at a rate increase on municipal drainage next year and a sizable bond issuance on that. So also, we do have cash funding totaling $32 million included for our capital maintenance funds. So now I will call up who is first on the agenda. They're going to go over all the projects with you. Mr. Smith.
Yes. Thank you, and good evening, council. My name is Ron Smith. This was all of Karen's slides right here that we'll quickly speed through to get to the different categories for Parks and Recreation. Here we go. Again, Ron Smith, your Parks and Recreation Director. Glad to be here tonight. The Parks and Recreation CIP is funded out of 5 categories. They're listed there on the slide. You've also received in your packet a memorandum that goes comprehensively over each project. I think there's a total of 85 that Parks and Recreation has as part of its CIP budget for fiscal year 24-25. This total is 78 million of those categories summed together. In the Recreation Centers category, we only have one project. It is the renovation of the Tom Muhlenbeck Recreation Center. That project is scheduled to get underway mid-February of 2025. For parks improvements, I've just got a couple that I wanted to mention. This is not all of them that you're seeing there. Again, I would ask you to refer to the memo that's in your packet. Bob Woodruff North Core renovation, which is a $4.9 million project, a new bathroom, new play pit, all of those renovations at Bob Woodruff, one of our biggest and most popular parks. Also, a new restroom for the south side of Bob Woodruff Park will be constructed. Chisholm Trail at Spring Creek Parkway, susceptible to flooding when we have big rain events. We're going to address that. Infield Park that came to council just a little while ago. New restrooms and new lighting for those 8 ball fields at Infield Park. The Park Capital Maintenance Fund, Parks and Recreation has $6.4 million identified for that. This is how we troubleshoot and address a lot of issues in our parks inventory, including athletic fields, irrigation, renovations, swimming pool equipment, recreation center needs, park renovations, and this is where we also fund a lot of the master planning work that happens before a park is renovated, comes out of this fund as well. The park fee, this is specific to different regions in the city according to residential development, and we've identified projects in 3 areas for next year's fiscal year. And the Municipal Drainage Fund, we've identified $10 million in projects here, including $1.3 million for Arbor Hills and an erosion control project, sediment removal at Big Lake Park, and also some erosion control at Pecan Hollow Golf Course. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the Parks and Recreation CIP. And if there are no questions, again, refer to the memo that I've provided, and I'll turn it over to Caleb Thornhill in engineering if there are no questions.
I think Shelby has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. This might actually be a question for Mark or Caleb, but regarding the municipal drainage, how is that factoring in the potential costs for erosion control citywide per some of our previous discussions? And I know we were going to have a philosophical discussion about covering cost for erosion control in the future.
So we have not gotten to that. We've actually completed, the 3-year walk has been completed by the consultant, so they're in the process of working through the plan, and Caleb can give an ETA on that. But once we have that and understand the conditional assessment, we'll be bringing back a bigger discussion for council to have a large discussion and probably a costly discussion to say, what does participation need to look like for the city? What are the priorities? And that'll be assessed, that'll be part of the data that's actually provided through their assessment to be able to give y'all.
Okay, do we have an ETA on that, and do we expect that to be rolled into like this budget cycle or tonight?
No.
No,
It's not this,
no.
not this
I
budget
was
cycle,
going
but
to
the
give a
ETA.
brief update on it. But yeah, from an ETA standpoint, like Mark mentioned, they have walked all 120 miles, which is actually a season ahead. They're supposed to finish the last third, essentially, this fall. They've already finished. So they're in the process of putting the data together, putting the sheets together for each location, putting together cost estimates, and then they will provide that information. There'll be some back and forth as far as QA/QC. So the hope is sometime September, October, November timeframe, we'll have that data in a presentable form. Obviously, discuss that with Karen, but present to you guys what the study results are.
But Councilman, I'd also add that if we get that information, say it's October, November, if the cost is such that it requires a mid-year adjustment to rates and things like that, those are things that we can consider at that time and obviously bring back to y'all if that's what makes sense for us to get going on that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, didn't mean for everybody else to steal your thunder, Dr. Smith.
All right, Caleb.
Yeah, I needed more camera time tonight. All right, Caleb Thornhill, Director of Engineering. So I'm going to talk through the CIP overview for engineering, combined CIP and transportation, and then actually engineering facilities will follow this. So project types, this presentation is very similar to Dr. Smith's. There's a memo in your packet that goes through more detail of the actual projects, but I'll give a high-level review. We talked about project types, streets improvements, transportation, we lumped together, municipal drainage, water and sewer, but you can see the total funding of $112 million there. Just each of these types includes, streets rehabilitation, drainage, erosion control, like Councilmember Williams was just discussing. Water and sewer are very similar. It's water capacity, it's maintenance for those two. From a breakdown, you can see streets is the larger amount, 62 million. But as Karen was alluding to earlier, the sewer is 23 million, which is a big project or a big number for us. You can see there's 9 projects scheduled for next year, and they are all large sewer replacements. Drainage is 12.8 and the water is 4.6. The water is going to be our typical neighborhood rehab type projects, replacing cast iron maintenance locations. Funding source, we've got 56 for bond, and this is just for streets. A small amount for Collin County and a small amount from the regional toll revenue. These are agreements that essentially, you can see there, the 2007 Collin County bonds that were still expiring. The Legacy and Parker are actually getting close, so we're excited about that. And then they both share RTR funds with those as well. We did have DART last year, but that's been used. So there's limited outside funding right now. We do have a couple transportation projects that may or may not have some federal funds, but I did not include that with this one. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on street project types. You can see there, broken it out in construction, design, intersection or street capacity improvements, miscellaneous, which includes screening walls, which I'll get into, and then transportation. This is, call it a heat map, project map that we've put together. The green, what you see there, those are projects that were completed last year, which the team did an excellent job getting that much work. But you can see there from the red, that's projects that are proposed to be under construction for next year. So we've tried to spread the pain out throughout the city. We didn't focus on one area, but we do have a lot of projects active. You can see from the first slide, we have 109 active projects. Design, there's a list of some projects we'll have under design. You see the picture, that's G Avenue. So I would say that's right downtown, but we're actually not downtown tonight. But that's between 14th and 15th at G Avenue. That does include a water line replacement as well. And another slide, the green is projects that we finished design last year. So those will be moving to construction. Red is what we anticipate under design for this coming fiscal year. And if I'm going too fast, you guys interrupt me, please. Intersection improvements. We've talked about this before, but there's really two main reasons we do an intersection improvement. The safety, obviously the biggest component, and congestion. There are ancillary improvements. Pedestrian ADA is also included if we're at those locations. And what we're trying to do is if we do go to a location, we take care of everything so that we're not coming back and adding another lane or adding another turn lane. We try to knock them all out. The pedestrian improvements, a lot of our locations have old, outdated pedestrian signals, and so we're updating those as well. You can see there we finished 17 last year, but we have 25 that will be under construction for this upcoming fiscal year. And there's a map. Again, we've spread the paint evenly and everywhere. The red is what will be under construction next year. Miscellaneous, I touched on a minute ago. The big project or the big item in here is usually screening walls. And I'll get to that in the next slide. It does include bridge inspection and repair. We receive reports every 2 years from TxDOT on our bridges and culverts. And so those are included with there. And then sidewalk is another one. Any gaps that we have or repair that needs to be done that exceeds public works, street lighting, and then some other things as well. So I mentioned screening walls. I just wanted to give you some context. City of Plano owns or maintains 77 miles of screening walls throughout the city. And that cost is about $800 to $1,000. Obviously, it depends on the project. Some projects will do improvements to the alley, depending on the alley condition. The majority of them do replace the sidewalk if the sidewalk is adjacent to it. Our projects average just under a mile apiece. Last year, we finished 14,000 linear feet, so just under 3 miles. And next year, we've got design and construction for 22,000 linear feet. You can see there from the picture is a screening wall along Custer Road. This was pre-construction, and the biggest issue that we find with these is the foundations were put in improperly or poorly. And so you can see segments of the wall moving, bricks moving. We do partner with Public Works on these, but once it gets to this type of condition, it's no longer doing a panel replacement. And so you can see here from the updated picture, we come in, replace the sidewalk, update the foundation, put in new piers, and hopefully a wall that's going to last a long time. So transportation, we did talk a little bit about earlier, but we do have a lot of projects. The team is very active. I wanted to focus on the third bullet point, the traffic cabinet, controller, and system heart upgrades. We've been in here a couple times already. A lot of these are being deployed, so we're very excited about that. And then the CCTV expansion was also, that's the one that may have some federal funds. That's a project where we will fund it up front, and then there'll be federal reimbursement once we finish construction. So municipal drainage that you touched on a little bit, the erosion control, the stream bank stabilization, or the stream bank assessment is the first one on there. That one hopefully will be wrapping up this fall. We have not seen data yet, but they did finish walking it this spring. And then we've got a few other locations that we are going to do erosion control projects. The picture there, that's along 16th Street, along the Spring Creek. That's where we partner with our Parks Department with the improvements of a trail as well as the stream bank stabilization. Water improvements, again, the majority of these are rehab. I think everybody's familiar with Parker Road water rehab. We are wrapping that up, and just a few punch list items. All lanes are open, So we're excited to be out of there. But yeah, the majority of these are water line rehabs. It's replacing cast iron. It's replacing pipes that are 50 or 60 years old. We've got almost 1,500 miles of water line throughout the city. We finished 80,000 last year, but we've got 160 planned in design or construction, excuse me, this upcoming year. Sewer, I mentioned, here's a list of our projects. All of these are large main projects, and that's why, you know, it's got us having lots of conversations with Karen about the cost of these. They're not necessarily capacity or adding capacity. These are just conditions or already experiencing surcharging and going in and replacing them based on the condition or the maintenance. So we do have a lot of projects in sewer. I believe.
Caleb, I want to add something real quick. On these big projects, this is just the 1-year cost to get it up and running. They will be over the next 2 or 3 years. That Spring Creek Interceptor, at the end of the day, that's going to cost $40 million. It's got 3 phases to it. So that's why we are putting forth $80 million. We might not need that whole $80 million, but all these add up to $80 million. So I just wanted to add that in.
Very good. That's it.
Well, we are going to have the nicest sewers in North Texas.
Thanks, Caleb.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. Paul Gunza, Facilities Division Manager of the Engineering Department. So facilities, the most exciting part of the night. I know you've been waiting for it. I mean, if you don't like facilities, I mean, really. All right, we had 61 projects this year, just under 20 million, which represents 6% of the overall CIP load. Broken down to 13.75 million for bond projects and 6.25 roughly for capital maintenance projects. We've got 12 projects overall on the bond side, and notably we've got Station 5. We're going to be building the fuel station this year. I'm going to show you 2 parks projects that aren't in these numbers, but were in the numbers Dr. Smith showed you. They get the projects, we build them for them. There's a bunch of miscellaneous capital improvement projects. We're at the tail end of the 21 bond. We have stuff like new windows for Haggard Library, parking lot layover for Schimmelfinnig Library, stuff like that. And then on the capital maintenance side, we have 49 projects. I'll give you a little bit more breakdown in a couple slides. Fire Station 5, I think most of everybody on this board was here when we brought it here for award to our, for construction. About 50% in now, it's going well. This week we're flying in structural steel, so that's a real big monument. This project again was to add capacity in the station, help fire change the mission. There had never been a med unit there. They needed the extra beds for a med unit. That changed, and this also allows us to put in our second certified storm shelter. Tom Muhlenbeck Rec Center. It was slated for an overall refresh of all the finishes throughout. There's some aquatic stuff we wanted to do. The roof was ready to be replaced. The HVAC was ready to be replaced. Basically, this facility is about 15 years old and it needed a lot of things. There's no square footage being added. We're just making it better. High Point Fuel Station. Big point of this is more strategic advantage when we have things like, grid loss like Winter Storm Uri. It also really decreases the amount of cost of our fuel if we can convince all our vehicles to go through it. And then the really added bonus is we're going to have a much better data retrieval from all of our city vehicles. This system not only mates up with the vehicle and knows it will only fill a city vehicle or a city-owned red gas can. You also have to swipe your city ID. When it does that too, it also grabs telemetry from the vehicle. So now fleet knows exactly where that vehicle's mileage is, all those things. If there's trouble alerts, they get transmitted that. And then Oak Point Parks Maintenance, corner of Los Rios and Parker. It's really going to increase the capacity on the east side to help it grow with the needs and all the parks on that side. Sits right on Oak Point Park, so it's going to really help them keep that big park up. And we've also increased the ability to do training there and some other capacities of it. We are adding a trailhead improvement right on the corner to kind of help everybody out. It's going to have some ability to service their bikes plus use restrooms there before they go out on the trails. And then on the capital maintenance fund, we got $6.2 million of projects. Of the 1.9 of safety and security, that's over 13 projects. We have 25 projects that make up the 3.3 preservation of infrastructure, 9 projects for supporting the city mission. That's if other departments need us to change their suite around to support the bodies they have, or something they did internally that they need some adjustments to. And then just 2 projects of sustainability. That's the maintenance of our solar arrays, plus we carry a fee to hire engineers to do any energy assessments we might have. And that's facilities.
All
Are
right.
there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Anthony?
Thank you, Mayor. So, Paul, I'm not sure if this is a question for you, but I think it's a facilities thing. There's been discussion about a chicken coop at the animal shelter. I know that's in the midst of all of these CIP projects. That's I'm sure the main one you want to talk about. But is that a question for you? Or?
My folks are building that, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, first of all, I think those of us who were on the council when we legalized backyard hens understood that a chicken coop at the animal shelter was part of what was going to be necessary, because any animals that are in the city, some will become loose and be collected and end up at the animal shelter. And so I don't question the need for a coop. We obviously have to have that, but there's been some discussion about, I've seen, the $50,000 number, then I saw an email today that had a $62,600 number. Do you know exactly what the number is and if most of that is design fees?
I would have to get back to you on the design number, but I can tell you that sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
Gotcha.
We have to comply with all of our own needs, so we have to get a fully blown engineered, revamp the site plan to be able to show the chicken coop as an improvement. So
And thank you, Paul. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that's something that facilities is causing or that you're causing.
Oh, sure.
I think this is something that may be on us as a council. The requirements that we have approved and put in place mean that you have to engage engineers or architects or something on a chicken coop. And so that's, to Councilmember Prince's point about, do we need this $200,000 study right now? We're in penny pinching mode. I mean, there are organic farmers out there, I assume, who, are treating their hens very well, who get the organic stamp at the grocery store. And, we all feel good about buying those eggs because the chickens were treated humanely. And I'm all for the humane treatment of all animals, including chickens. But, and I see Councilmember Prince is cracking up over there. But in all seriousness, so we have to treat chickens humanely. But to your point about being our own worst enemy, in penny pinching mode, we really need to take a look at our requirements. There should not be engineers engaged on a chicken coop, in my personal opinion, and there should not be architectural drawings. Exactly. It could be an Eagle project. Councilmember Smith said that's what the Boy Scouts are for.
So one of the triggers, to understand, we would all love to buy a chicken wire, build a chicken wire plywood coop, right? But we are treating the chickens nicely, and the chickens need heat in the winter. What gives heat? Electricity. Code kicks in right there.
I got you, and I appreciate that, and I understand it's the code that we passed. I want to be very clear, Paul.
Sure.
You're doing an excellent job, and you're doing what the rules that we have enacted are requiring you to do.
Yep.
I'm saying I think as part of this budget process, we may need to take another look at the rules that we've enacted, because there are very humanely treated chickens, and I bet this is showing up in other places in the budget where we haven't caught it, where things could be done really well at a high standard of excellence without some of the red tape that we as a council may have created, and be done more cheaply, and that money could be passed along to our employees. I mean, I know this couldn't because it's in the CIP, it's debt funded, and that can't be used for O&M, but I would like to see the regulations that are causing this to be a $50,000 or $60,000 chicken coop, And I'd like to take a second look at those as a council and maybe repeal some of them, because I suspect there are other impacts throughout the budget where maybe if we got out of the way a little bit of being over regulatory, we might be able to save some money and pass it along to our excellent employees.
And Councilman, we'll be happy to bring you back a report on the regulations helping cause some of those elements. I think the challenge becomes the broader applicability of a public policy of saying that we're no longer going to apply that to city projects versus other projects becomes part of the challenge. So we'll be happy to bring you back a report, and we'll see where we go from there. But I think that's something to keep in mind as we
Well, and thank you for keeping that in mind. I would just love to see the regulations, and if there are ways that we can more narrowly tailor them to make sure that we're doing those kinds of steps when it's meaningful, when it protects public safety, or when it makes sure that we have quality facilities, but allows us to build a chicken coop the same way an organic farmer would.
Okay. Thank you.
So I want to make one more point about the chicken coop. You need to check this. I'm 95% sure it was funded by donation money. Not.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So I saw an email today that said, I may have misinterpreted it. I thought it said it was originally funded all but $7,500 from donation money, but then I took originally to mean that it no longer is. But I may be mistaken. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that you're doing a great job, and if we're in your way, I want us to
the
get out of
chicken's
the way.
love me. What can I say? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Abby Owens, Director of Public Works. Nice to see you all again. So for Public Works, we've got about 81 projects is what's in the CIP, and that's between street improvements and also water and wastewater. About 57 million is through bond funding, and then capital maintenance fund is for just under 30 million. So our total street funding is just under 87 million. 34, almost 35 million of that is for arterial concrete repair and overlay. We aim to achieve about 10 miles a year. We are running into some challenges with number of contractors that can do this and also having roads ready to go. Sometimes we're delayed because of water line projects or intersections or even private development as well. So, but that's what our plan is for next year. These are our tentatively scheduled locations for overlay. The green ones is what will be completed this year, as many of y'all have seen over on Los Rios. The purple are what we are planning to have overlaid next year, and then we will also have the arterial repairs that are going on the ones in orange, and the ones in gray are what we have already completed to date. For residential street and alley rehab, this is about 22 million of the bond funding, and this is where we will do all of the alleys and streets and sidewalks in a neighborhood. These are the zones that we are currently going on this year that will continue into next year, and then the additional ones that we'll be adding, which are the ones in red. We try to get to our residential zones about every 20 to 25 years, and we are coming up on that 25-year mark and have been able to see that that's right around the right mark. It really just kind of depends on the quantity of sidewalks and ramps that are there and the street repairs needed. But this is where we are planning to head for next year. And then for our CMF funding, we have about 30 million that is allocated for the minor repairs that are happening in neighborhoods. So we call these requirements contracts. This is where we'll hire contractors that'll kind of jump around. We work on closing out backlogs of sidewalk requests. If there's a alley or a street that it's too large of repair for our in-house crews to do, that's when we would have a contractor manage that. We also use the funding for our joint sealing and under sealing, and that is again to bring pavement up a little bit in order for it to be more even to drive across, but then the joint sealing is to prevent water from getting into the cracks. And then we also use this funding for screening wall reconstruction. So different from what engineering does, this is going to be, I'd say that screening walls appear to have targets on them for vehicles, and so that is when we will go out and fix those. But then we also have smaller panel replacements where the foundation's in good quality. We just need to go and actually repair the screening wall panels themselves. For part of our other CMF funding, we use on our traffic elements, and so that could be the markings and buttons that go down for safety for driving, but then also our street lighting. There are some lights within the city that we do own that are lit, not the traffic signalized lights, but the actual street lights, and then some minor guardrail and traffic sign replacement. For water, we have just over 8 million allocated, and we use this in a variety of ways. This is not bond funded for our side of it, as Karen had mentioned for sewer. But for instance, on the right-hand side, we had a major water line repair that had to be done earlier this year. It was a 24-inch line. It was deeper than our in-house crews can, but also there was complications with some storm drains and things around. So we use this funding to hire a contractor to make that emergency repair. But then on our proactive side, we're doing proactive assessment and rehab of our Parker elevated storage tank. Also, we're doing a master plan for our Ridgeview, which is our workhorse pump station, and that's we're making sure that we've got adequate equipment and capacity there. Also, we do proactive water valve exercising and inventory, and also leak detection. And we're going to look at doing inside pipe leak detection, condition assessment over the next year too. And then sewer, just under 6 million here. And this is going to be for any of our minor sewer replacements. So we'll use this for CIPP, which is like a lining of the sewer line to reduce any inflow and infiltration. And then also sealing manholes. We've hired a contractor previously to do large diameter inspections of our sewer mains. And we also do flow monitoring to identify where we need to spend funding to reduce I&I. And that's mine. Any questions on water, sewer, engineering? I mean, the public works side of things?
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Perfect. Thank you.
The next item will be comments of public interest. Comments of public interest. This portion of the meeting is to allow up to 3 minutes per speaker with 30 total minutes on items of interest or concern and not on items that are on the current agenda. The council may not discuss these items but may respond with factual or policy information. The council may choose to place the item on a future agenda. And we do have 2 speakers tonight. Hold on here. Okay.
Hello?
Mr. Chavez?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and turn on your camera if you would, please. And your
Yes.
3 minutes starts now.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at where I can turn on my camera, and I apologize for that. I do not see where on this view options. I apologize for that. Does it matter if I can turn on my camera or not?
We do have to see you in accordance with the public open meetings.
Well, the only thing I see right now is my microphone, and I don't see anything else as far as an option. I can mute my microphone, but I can't do anything else.
Okay.
Surely there would be like a camera icon next to my microphone, would there not?
There's typically a start video icon somewhere on your form.
Yeah, recording, start video. Oh, bear with me. Apologize for this. Oh, view options. Oh, here, join as panelist. There we go.
Here we go.
And now, here we go. Can you guys see me now? Hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that. Good evening, members of the council and fellow Plano residents. And basically, I would like to go ahead and discuss my concern, or actually my interest in creating dedicated barrier bicycle lanes for the city of Plano. And this meeting is quite serendipitous because in the earlier session, you guys had your legacy, let's see here, you guys had your other one about your executive session, and that was dealing about the legacy drive and headquarters development and initiatives to make that more profitable or increase the use of that. And I think one of the things that the physical or basically the dedicated barrier bicycle lanes does is it creates the opportunity to connect people And I would say that it's one of those where if you build it, they will come. And it's at from what I have seen and studied from other municipalities, it's not a very expensive first engagement. There could be a pilot program. And so I was thinking, let me just put my thought for that, is a pilot program initiative from connecting the neighborhoods on Legacy Coit all the way to the shops of Legacy and Legacy West. And that would be like taking one lane, providing that as a barrier dedicated bicycle lane, where you could connect families now and workers to that development. And I'm sure that a lot of the individual businesses would appreciate a lot of that traffic. There is a large enthusiast bicycling community here in Plano. And so I'm thinking that is something that is definitely something to consider. Also earlier you guys were discussing about the aging community in Plano and how to bring more people in. Definitely by bicycles, you would provide that. So not only that, but it also provides the opportunity for people who are economically disadvantaged to join in this as well. So I would really be happy if you guys were able to employ something like that as a pilot program.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Bill Lyle. Mr. Lyle, are you there? Go ahead. You're on mute, sir.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Council. I have been paying attention to a couple of items that are on IonWave, which is the website that the city uses to solicit bids on different projects. And there's two that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight. I've appreciated many of the comments that y'all have made about looking at things a little through a different lens with especially the money situation we're in. But one of them is the chicken coop, Anthony, that you brought up. Just to let you know, staff let me know today that we spent $12,600 to revise a site plan and to have a registered licensed architect design a chicken coop. And the engineer's estimate on the city solicitation website is $50,000 to construct that. It's possible that it comes in less than that, but that's the engineer's estimate at this time. If you go to Tractor Supply, you can find pre-manufactured chicken coops that are really nice for around $1,500. Typically, heat in one of these comes from like a red lamp that you would see in a bathroom, like a heat lamp. That's what typically farm animals use to stay warm when they huddle together. Currently, there's 3 chickens in the city's possession, and they're in dog and cat kennels, which seems appropriate to me. I mean, if my dog gets picked up and he's going to get in a box, I think it's big enough for a chicken, or even 3 chickens maybe in one box. So I think, as y'all can figure out, I think $62,000 for a chicken coop and a revised site plan is way beyond what would be appropriate for this expense. Secondly, there's a dumpster enclosure designed for Russell Creek Park in the northern central Plano area. I went out to visit the park. There's already a very large dumpster enclosure there that's 650 square feet. It's got the capacity to hold 4, the 6 or 7 yard typical blue dumpster you see around, or you could have 2 large 10-yard dumpsters in there. Staff commented on this today via email with Jack Carr, and there's a Connex box in there, which is actually contrary to our zoning ordinance. If you look at Article 20, 400.3-B, it says that enclosures for containers must only be used for purposes related to solid waste programs as authorized by the City of Plano Code of Ordinances. So
20 seconds.
I think the reason that staff, or one of the reasons that they're trying to build a second dumpster enclosure is because they're not using the dumpster closure that is there to its capacity. And then lastly, I would just say that another staff comment from staff was that there's peak seasons where they host a lot of tournaments.
It's time.
And it seems to me that you could just increase the amount of time that Republic, the trash dumpster folks actually.
There being no further business, we're adjourned.
No chickens were harmed in the filming of this meeting.